The Fort Bragg rifle range sits empty at 0530 hours. Most soldiers won't arrive for another 2 hours. But Staff Sergeant Luna Valdez has been here since 0430, methodically cleaning her Barrett M82A1. The 50 caliber rifle rests across sandbags, its barrel catching the first gray light of dawn. Luna's hands move with practiced efficiency, but there's a tremor she can't quite control. The cleaning rod slips once, twice. She pauses, closes her eyes, counts backward from 10 in Spanish, a technique her therapist suggested 3 months ago when the VA finally assigned her an appointment. The tremor isn't from inexperience, it's from too much experience. She's 29 years old and looks younger, which has always been a problem. At 5'4" with a slender frame, she doesn't fit anyone's mental image of a sniper, much less one with a classified service record that spans 3 continents. Her uniform is crisp, her hair pulled into a regulation bun, but there's something in her eyes that speaks to nights without sleep and days spent managing symptoms no one can see. The unauthorized emblem sits on her left shoulder. Small, discreet, easily missed, unless you know what you're looking for. A stylized scope reticle with numbers so small they're almost invisible, 3,200 millimeters. She shouldn't be wearing it. The unit that awarded it to her doesn't officially exist in any public records. The mission that earned it is still classified at the highest levels. But after everything that's happened in the past 6 months, the medical review board, the threats of discharge, the constant implication that she's somehow deficient, she needs this small rebellion. Behind her, gravel crunches under boots. Staff Sergeant Valdez. Luna doesn't flinch at the voice, though her jaw tightens imperceptibly. She continues her cleaning routine, giving herself 3 more seconds before she has to acknowledge Staff Sergeant Marcus Chen, the range safety officer and her current professional nightmare. Staff Sergeant Chen. She sets down the cleaning rod and stands, not quite meeting his eyes. It's not respect. It's a learned behavior from the past 6 months of being scrutinized for every micro-expression. Chen is 15 years her senior, a career soldier who spent the last decade in training commands. He's never deployed to a combat zone, a fact that wouldn't matter except that he wields it like a weapon in reverse, as if her deployments are somehow suspicious, her experience somehow fabricated. You're early again. His tone suggests this is a problem rather than dedication. Waiting for the range to open, Staff Sergeant. With that, he gestures at the Barrett. You know we don't typically authorize 150 cal for standard qualifications. I have authorization from Major Williams. Yes, I've seen the paperwork. Chen's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Though I'm still unclear why a reserve component staff sergeant needs to maintain proficiency on a weapon system she'll never use again. The implication hangs in the air that she's playing pretend, that her record is somehow inflated, that her presence here is an indulgence rather than a requirement. Luna has heard variations of this for 6 months, ever since she transferred to the reserve component following her medical evaluation. The evaluation that documented her traumatic brain injury, mild, they classified it, though there's nothing mild about the way sounds sometimes split apart in her head, or how fluorescent lights can trigger migraines that last for days. Maintaining combat readiness, Staff Sergeant. Her voice is flat, professional, giving nothing away. Chen walks closer, inspecting her weapon setup with exaggerated thoroughness. You don't look like someone who's seen combat. There it is. The sentence that's been repeated so many times it's lost its ability to hurt, replaced by a dull, grinding frustration. Luna could respond. She could mention the 17 months she spent attached to a special operations task force. She could describe the mountain ranges of Afghanistan, the urban environments of Iraq, the classified location where she made the shot that earned her the emblem Chen hasn't noticed yet. She could detail the IED blast that gave her the TBI, how she'd been providing overwatch when the explosion's pressure waves slammed through her position, how she'd completed the mission before reporting her symptoms, how those symptoms were dismissed for months as stress or anxiety or the dozen other explanations people prefer to brain injury. Instead, she says, I have my medical clearance for range activities. Clearance. Chen picks up the word like it's contaminated. You know what I think? I think people are too quick to accommodate these days. A little stress, a little difficulty adjusting, and suddenly everyone needs special treatment. Luna's hands have stopped trembling. They're very still now, resting at her sides. This is a different kind of control. The control that comes from knowing that any reaction will be used as evidence of instability. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to qualify with my assigned weapon system. Your assigned weapon system is the M4, Staff Sergeant. This, he taps the Barrett's barrel, is you trying to relive glory days that most people in your chain of command aren't convinced actually happened. The morning sun has risen enough to cast long shadows across the range. In an hour, other soldiers will arrive for their qualifications. In an hour, Luna will have to perform under the scrutiny of Chen and whoever else decides that a female staff sergeant with a TBI is inherently suspicious. My service record is heavily redacted. Yes, I'm aware. Chen crosses his arms. Which is convenient, isn't it? Can't verify what's classified. Luna feels the familiar spike of cortisol, the way her system floods with fight or flight responses that have nowhere to go. Her therapist calls it hypervigilance. The Army calls it a symptom to manage. Chen calls it proof of instability. Staff Sergeant Chen, I have a 0800 range time authorized by Major Williams, who isn't here this morning. Chen's smile widens slightly. I am the range safety officer. I make the final calls on what happens on my range. Your range. Luna repeats the words carefully. That's right, and I'm not convinced you're safe to operate a 50 caliber weapon system. The recoil alone, given your medical history, my medical clearance, covers basic activities, but I have discretionary authority when it comes to crew-served or specialty weapons. He's enjoying this, Luna realizes, this small exercise of power over someone who makes him uncomfortable, someone whose record implies experiences he's never had. Luna knows what's coming next. She's played this scene 6 times in the past 3 months. Chen will find a reason to delay, to question, to require additional authorization. He'll make her wait while he reviews paperwork he's already reviewed. He'll schedule her for times when the range is closed for maintenance. He'll do everything possible to create a paper trail that suggests she's difficult, unstable, unsuited for continued service. And when she finally loses her patience, when she finally shows the frustration that any soldier would feel under these circumstances, he'll point to that moment as proof that his concerns were valid all along. It's a perfect trap. And Luna has walked into it repeatedly because the alternative is to simply accept the erasure of her service, the implication that her record is fabricated, that she's somehow less capable than she was before an IED's pressure wave scrambled the precise instrument she'd trained her brain to become. I'll need to see additional medical documentation, Chen says. Specifically, neurological evaluations within the past 30 days. Those evaluations are part of my ongoing VA treatment. They're medical records. Then get them released. Until then, no 50 cal authorization from me. Luna takes a breath, holds it, releases it slowly. She's learned this technique too, the way to prevent her voice from shaking, her hands from clenching, her face from showing the rage that sits just beneath her professional demeanor. Staff Sergeant Chen, with respect, you're creating barriers that don't exist in the regulations. With respect, Staff Sergeant Valdez, I'm ensuring range safety. If you have a problem with my assessment, you're welcome to take it up the chain of command, which would require her to lodge a formal complaint, creating documentation that she's difficult, that she can't work within the established system, that she's antagonistic to leadership. All phrases she's already seen in her file from previous conflicts with Chen. I see. Luna's voice has gone very quiet. Good. I'm glad we understand each other. Chen turns to leave, then pauses. You know, Valdez, there are plenty of positions in the reserve component for people with your limitations. Administrative roles, training coordinator positions, jobs where you wouldn't need to pretend to be something you're not. And there it is, the final twist of the knife. The suggestion that she should accept a role that erases her expertise, that confirms the narrative Chen has constructed where she's an imposter rather than a highly trained operator working through the medical aftermath of doing her job. Luna doesn't respond. She watches Chen walk away, his posture radiating satisfaction. When he's gone, she returns to her Barrett. Her hands are shaking again, but she forces them steady. She has 2 hours before anyone else arrives. 2 hours to maintain the muscle memory, the breathing control, the mathematical precision that defined her for 6 years before the blast. 2 hours to prove to herself, if no one else, that she's still the soldier she trained to become. The emblem on her shoulder catches the morning light, 3,200 millimeters, a distance that shouldn't be possible with this weapon system, in these conditions, with these variables. A distance that represents not just a shot, but an entire career's worth of skills compressed into a single moment. Chen didn't notice it. Most people don't. It's small enough to be mistaken for a standard qualification badge, obscure enough that only people with specific knowledge would understand its significance. Luna assembles her rifle, checking each component with the methodical precision that's kept her alive through 4 deployments. The tremor in her hands is barely noticeable now, just a small disruption in an otherwise fluid series of movements. She thinks about Chen's words, "Pretend to be something you're not." The irony is almost funny. Almost. Luna spends the next 90 minutes working through her routine, dry fire exercises, breathing control, mathematical calculations for wind, temperature, barometric pressure, all the variables that transform shooting from a mechanical act into a scientific discipline. The numbers calm her. They always have. In the chaos of combat, in the uncertainty of her current medical status, in the grinding frustration of dealing with Chen, the numbers remain reliable. Physics doesn't care about gender or medical records or institutional bias. A bullet follows the laws of motion regardless of who fires it. At 07:45, other soldiers begin arriving for their qualifications. Luna watches them set up at the standard rifle lanes, prepping their M4s for the routine marksmanship test that most troops complete annually without incident. Some glance her way, their eyes lingering on the Barrett before moving on. A few nod in greeting. Most ignore her. She's used to being invisible. In special operations, invisibility was an asset. Here, it's just isolation. Valdez. Major Sarah Williams approaches from the range control tower, her stride purposeful. She's in her mid-40s, a logistics officer who served as Luna's advocate through the medical review process. Without Williams, Luna would have been medically discharged 3 months ago. "Ma'am?" Luna comes to attention. "At ease. I heard Chen gave you trouble this morning." "Staff Sergeant Chen expressed concerns about range safety, ma'am." Williams's expression tightens. "Chen expresses concerns about a lot of things. Most of them revolve around his discomfort with operators who have more trigger time than he has time in service." Luna doesn't respond. Agreeing would be unprofessional. Disagreeing would be dishonest. "I've signed off on your 50 cal authorization. Again, if Chen continues to create barriers, I want documentation, dates, times, specific statements." Williams hands Luna a folder. "Your quarterly evaluation is due next week. I need you to understand something. There are people in the command who want you gone. Not because you're incapable, because you make them uncomfortable." "I understand, ma'am. I don't think you do." Williams lowers her voice. "You represent something they can't process. A female sniper with a classified record and a TBI. Each piece individually makes them nervous. Combined, you're a walking contradiction to their understanding of how the military works." Luna has heard variations of this speech before, usually from the handful of officers who actually read her file rather than just reacting to the redactions. The best thing you can do is keep your head down, complete your qualifications, and give them no ammunition. Williams glances at the emblem on Luna's shoulder. Her expression shifts, recognition quickly masked. "Is that what I think it is?" "Ma'am, the emblem, your left shoulder." Luna's jaw tightens. She should have removed it before coming to the range. Wearing unauthorized insignia is a minor infraction, but combined with everything else, it's another data point in the narrative that she's undisciplined, unable to follow regulations. "I can explain." "No explanation necessary. I know what it represents. I also know you shouldn't be wearing it in public." Williams's voice is firm, but not unkind. "Remove it. Now." Luna unpins the emblem, sliding it into her pocket. The gesture feels like surrender. "Good. Now listen carefully." Williams steps closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "There's a review happening at division level. General Matthews is conducting a personal audit of reserve component readiness. He's specifically looking at soldiers with complex medical profiles, people who might be retained when they should be medically separated." Luna's stomach drops. General Mark Matthews is a legend in the Army, but not the kind of legend that works in her favor. He's known for his emphasis on conventional readiness metrics, his skepticism of special operations integration, and his public statements about maintaining standards, in ways that often translate to increased scrutiny of female soldiers. "When is this review, ma'am?" "Next week. He'll be visiting this installation, observing qualifications, reviewing files." Williams meets Luna's eyes. "Your file is on his list, because of the medical profile, because of everything. The profile, the redactions, the conflict with Chen, it's all there. And Chen has been documenting every interaction, building a case that you're a liability rather than an asset." Luna feels the familiar tightness in her chest. Not panic, not quite, but the precursor to it. The sense that the walls are closing in, that no matter how well she performs, the system has already decided her fate. What do I do, ma'am? You shoot. William's voice is flat, matter-of-fact. You qualify with perfect scores. You give Matthews no reason to question your competence. And you pray that your classified record speaks louder than Chen's documentation. My classified record that no one can access. Your classified record that has enough indicators, even in redacted form, to suggest you're not someone who should be casually dismissed. Williams checks her watch. You have 15 minutes before the range goes hot. Use them. She walks away, leaving Luna alone with her Barrett and the weight of impossible expectations. Perfect scores. No visible symptoms. No tremors. No migraines. No indication that she's working through a brain injury that the military only reluctantly acknowledges as service-connected. Just performance, stripped of context, measured against soldiers who've never had their neurological function disrupted by the pressure wave of an improvised explosive device. Luna returns to her rifle. She has 15 minutes to transform herself into the operator she was before the blast, or at least to convincingly perform that transformation for an audience that's already decided she's deficient. The morning sun is fully up now, heat beginning to shimmer across the range. Luna calculates the thermal effects on ballistics, adjusting her mental models for the changing conditions. The math is automatic, reflexive, the product of thousands of hours of training. At 0800, the range safety brief begins. Chen delivers it with his usual emphasis on safety and following protocols, his eyes lingering on Luna throughout. When he reaches the section on crew-served and specialty weapons, he adds an improvised comment. Remember, just because you have authorization doesn't mean you're exempt from my assessment of safety concerns. Several soldiers glance at Luna. She keeps her expression neutral. The qualifications begin. Standard rifles first, M4 carbines at distances from 50 to 300 meters. Luna watches soldiers move through the familiar drill. Prone position, supported position, kneeling, standing. The targets are simple silhouettes. The distance is minimal compared to what she's trained for. At 0930, it's her turn with the Barrett. Luna approaches the firing line, aware of the attention she's drawing. A .50 caliber rifle is dramatic, nearly 5 feet long, weighing 30 pounds, designed for anti-material work rather than personnel. Seeing one at a standard qualification range is unusual. Seeing a staff sergeant who looks like Luna behind one is apparently fascinating. Valdez, you're cleared for 3 controlled shots at 800 meters, Chen announces over the range PA system. His voice carries a tone that suggests he's expecting failure. Targets are standard E-type silhouettes. You'll be scored on precision and consistency. Luna settles into position. The Barrett stock against her shoulder. Cheek weld perfect. Breathing controlled. She's done this 10,000 times. In training, in combat, in the countless hours of practice that separate someone who shoots from someone who's a sniper. But her hands are shaking again. Not badly. Not enough that anyone watching would notice. But enough that she notices. Enough that the tiny tremor translates through the weapon system. Enough that her precision, the mathematical perfection she's trained her body to execute, is compromised. She closes her eyes, counts backward from 10, forces her breathing into the rhythm that bypasses conscious thought, that accesses the muscle memory deeper than words. When she opens her eyes, the tremor has decreased. Not gone, but manageable. The first shot breaks clean. The Barrett's recoil is substantial but expected, a force she's trained to absorb and redirect. Through her scope, she sees the impact. Center mass, slightly left of optimal. Second shot. She adjusts for the minimal wind, compensates for the first round's deviation. The trigger press is smooth, almost meditative. Impact. Center mass. Good placement. Third shot. This is the one that matters. The shot that demonstrates consistency, that proves the first 2 weren't luck. She runs through the calculations one final time. Wind at 2 miles per hour from the east. Temperature rising to 81 degrees. Humidity at 42%. All minor factors at this distance, but she accounts for them anyway because precision is the accumulation of minor factors managed perfectly. The shot breaks. Through the scope, she watches the impact. Center mass. Tighter grouping than the first 2 shots. Around her, there's a moment of silence. Then one of the younger soldiers lets out a low whistle. Chen's voice crackles over the PA. Adequate. Valdez is cleared from the line. Adequate. The word is technically accurate. She's passed the qualification. It's also a dismissal, a way of minimizing what just happened. Most soldiers would be satisfied with groupings half that tight at 800 meters with a standard rifle. With a .50 caliber, that level of precision is exceptional. Chen knows it. Everyone watching knows it. But acknowledging it would contradict the narrative that Luna is somehow deficient, somehow less capable than her record suggests. Luna clears her weapon, performs the safety procedures with practiced precision. As she steps away from the firing line, she catches Major Williams watching from the observation tower. Williams gives a small nod, approval, recognition, but also something that looks like concern, because they both know that adequate isn't good enough. Not when General Matthews arrives next week with Chen's documentation and a mandate to identify soldiers who should be medically separated. Luna needs to be perfect. And perfection, when you're working through a traumatic brain injury that makes fluorescent lights feel like ice picks in your skull and causes sounds to sometimes fragment into painful static, is a standard that exists somewhere between difficult and impossible. She packs her Barrett with methodical care, aware that Chen is watching, looking for any sign that she's struggling. She keeps her movements smooth, her expression neutral, her posture confident. Inside, she's calculating how many days she has until the review, how many opportunities to demonstrate competence, how many chances to prove that her medical condition doesn't define her capabilities. 7 days. 7 days to convince a general who's never met her that she's worth keeping in service, despite a brain injury, despite the conflict with Chen, despite every institutional bias that suggests female soldiers with classified records and medical complications are more trouble than they're worth. 7 days to prove she's not pretending to be something she's not. 7 days to justify the emblem currently sitting in her pocket, the emblem that represents a shot made in conditions that would have been impossible for most snipers, a shot that saved lives, a shot that cost her more than anyone watching realizes. Luna shoulders her rifle case and walks off the range. Behind her, she hears Chen briefing the next group of qualifiers, his voice carrying the casual authority of someone who's never had to question whether his service record would be believed. She doesn't look back. The next 6 days pass in a rhythm of controlled anxiety. Luna maintains her routine, early morning range time, physical therapy appointments at the VA, evening sessions with her therapist, Dr. Patricia Keegan, who specializes in combat-related TBI. "Tell me about the tremors," Dr. Keegan says during their Thursday session. She's in her 50s, a former Army psychiatrist who transitioned to the VA specifically to work with special operations veterans. Her office is deliberately calm. Soft lighting, sound-dampening panels, no fluorescence. They come and go. Luna sits in the chair positioned away from the window. Direct sunlight triggers her migraines. "Worse when I'm stressed. And you've been stressed lately. It's not a question." Luna's stress is documented across multiple medical systems. Her TBI treatment plan, her neurological evaluations, the anxiety disorder that the VA finally diagnosed after months of Luna insisting that what she was experiencing wasn't normal adjustment stress. "The review is tomorrow." Luna's voice is flat. General Matthews arrives at 800. "Tell me what you're afraid of." Luna almost laughs. "That after everything, the deployments, the missions, the shot that gave me this," she gestures vaguely at her head, "I'll be dismissed because I had the poor judgment to get my brain scrambled by an IED. That's not poor judgment. That's combat. Tell that to Staff Sergeant Chen. Tell that to the people reviewing my file who see TBI and think liability rather than service-connected injury." Dr. Keegan leans forward slightly. "Have you told anyone about the full extent of your symptoms? What would be the point? So they can have more documentation that I'm impaired? So they can understand what you're managing? Luna, you're performing at exceptional levels while dealing with a neurological injury that would disable most people. That's not weakness. That's extraordinary resilience. Resilience doesn't matter if they decide I'm a safety risk. If they decide the tremors mean I can't be trusted with a weapon system. If they decide the headaches mean I'm unreliable." Luna feels her throat tighten. "I've spent 6 years becoming excellent at something very specific, and now that specificity makes me vulnerable, because the injury that proves I did the work is the same injury they use to say I can't do the work anymore. What do you need tomorrow to feel prepared?" Luna thinks about this. What she needs is impossible. She needs her brain to function the way it did before the blast. She needs the tremors to stop. She needs Chen to acknowledge her record instead of questioning it. She needs General Matthews to see her as a soldier rather than a medical liability. "I need to shoot perfectly," she finally says. "I need to give them no reason to doubt. And if you can't be perfect, then I'm done." Dr. Keegan is quiet for a long moment. Then, "You know that's not how medical evaluations work. You're not required to be perfect. You're required to be functional for your assigned duties. In theory. In practice, I'm being held to a standard that has nothing to do with functionality and everything to do with discomfort. I make people uncomfortable. Female snipers make people uncomfortable. Classified records make people uncomfortable. TBI makes people uncomfortable. Put it all together, and I'm a walking justification for why the military should tighten medical retention standards. Is that what Matthews is known for? Matthews is known for being old school, conventional readiness, traditional standards, which means people like me, complicated cases with non-standard career paths, are exactly the kind of soldiers he thinks the Army can do without. Dr. Keegan makes a note. How are you sleeping? I'm not. Nightmares? Just insomnia. And before you suggest the medications again, I can't be on sleep aids when I'm qualifying. The last thing I need is documentation that I require pharmacological intervention to function. Luna, you're describing a pattern of self-denial that's unsustainable. You're refusing treatment that would help because you're afraid of the documentation, which means you're performing while significantly impaired, which increases the risk that you'll have a visible episode that creates worse documentation. Luna knows Dr. Keegan is right. She also knows that the logic of medical best practices doesn't align with the logic of military retention decisions. A soldier who needs medication is, in the eyes of some evaluators, a soldier who's compromised. Never mind that the medication would improve function. The need itself is seen as a deficiency. I just need to get through tomorrow, Luna says. After the review, after Matthews signs off on retention, then I can focus on long-term treatment. And if he doesn't sign off? Luna doesn't answer. The question is too big. The implications too devastating to examine directly. The session ends with Dr. Keegan's usual reminder that Luna can call if she needs support. Luna thanks her, files the usual paperwork documenting the session, and drives back to her apartment near the base. She doesn't sleep that night. Instead, she runs through calculations, wind patterns, temperature gradients, ballistic coefficients, the math that grounds her when everything else feels unstable. At 0400, she gives up on sleep and goes to the range. The pre-dawn air is cool, almost cold. Luna sets up her Barrett in the pre-approved lane, running through her prep routine in darkness. The familiar movements calm her, breaking down the weapon system, inspecting each component, reassembling with the precision that's become reflexive. By 0600, other soldiers begin arriving. Word has spread that General Matthews is conducting the review today. Everyone's movements are slightly sharper, uniform, slightly crisper. The presence of a two-star general transforms routine activities into performances. Major Williams finds Luna at 0700. He's here, Williams says without preamble. Matthews arrived early. He's currently reviewing files in the command building. What's his schedule? He'll observe qualifications from 800 to 1000, conduct individual interviews from 1000 to 1200, make his recommendations by 1400. Williams's expression is carefully neutral. Your interview is scheduled for 10:15. 15 minutes after the range observation. 15 minutes for Matthews to form an initial impression based on her performance, and then an interview where every word will be evaluated for signs of instability or incompetence. Has he read my file? He's read the unclassified portions, the redacted sections. Williams trails off. He's not cleared for some of the details, but he knows enough to have questions. What kind of questions? The kind that a conventional general asks about a sniper with a TBI who's had multiple conflicts with her chain of command. Williams meets Luna's eyes. He's going to ask about Chen, about the qualifications, about whether you're capable of continued service. And what do I tell him? The truth, but carefully. Matthews respects competence and directness. What he doesn't respect is soldiers who make excuses or who blame their circumstances. Williams glances at her watch. You have 45 minutes. Use them to prepare mentally. And Luna, whatever you do, don't mention the emblem. The emblem. The 3200-meter marker currently sitting in Luna's locker. The physical representation of a shot that shouldn't be possible. A mission that's still classified. A moment of perfect performance that proved her skills and broke her brain. I won't, ma'am. Williams leaves. Luna returns to her Barrett, but her hands are shaking too badly to effectively perform the prep work. She closes her eyes, practices the breathing exercises Dr. Keegan taught her, tries to force her nervous system into calm. It doesn't work. At 0745, Staff Sergeant Chen arrives, his expression smug. He's dressed in his Class A uniform rather than his usual duty fatigues. Appearance matters when a general is present. He approaches Luna's position with exaggerated casualness. "Big day, Valdez. You ready to show the general what you can do?" Luna doesn't respond. Engaging with Chen has never improved the situation. "I've prepared my portion of your evaluation," Chen continues. "Very thorough. Lots of documentation about our interactions, about my concerns regarding your reliability." He pauses. "I'm sure the general will find it illuminating." Luna's hands have stopped shaking. They're very still, resting on her rifle case. This is the stillness that comes before decisive action, the moment when calculation replaces emotion. "Staff Sergeant Chen, is there a specific purpose to this conversation, or are you just trying to undermine my focus before a qualification?" Chen's smile widens. "Just friendly concern from one NCO to another. Though I suppose friendly might be too strong a word, given that you've made it clear you don't value my input. Your input has been documented. I'm sure the general will review it appropriately." "Oh, I'm counting on it." Chen checks his watch. "General Matthews should be arriving at the observation tower in about 10 minutes. I've made sure he has a good view of your lane. Wouldn't want him to miss anything." He walks away, leaving Luna with the clear understanding that today's qualification isn't just about demonstrating competence. It's about performing under the most hostile observation possible. At 0758, a convoy of vehicles arrives at the range control building. From the lead vehicle emerges General Mark Matthews, a tall man in his late 50s, his uniform bearing the insignia of his rank and multiple deployments. He moves with the confidence of someone who spent 30 years in uniform, who knows exactly what standards should be met and has little patience for those who fall short. Major Williams accompanies him, along with several staff officers and Chen. They make their way to the observation tower, a covered platform that provides clear sight lines to all the firing lanes. Luna watches through her scope as Matthews settles into position. Even at a distance, his presence is commanding. This is a man who's led soldiers in combat, who's made life and death decisions, who measures value in terms of mission effectiveness. Luna has to convince him that she's mission effective, despite a medical profile that suggests otherwise. The range goes hot at 0800. Standard qualifications proceed as scheduled. M4 carbines, various distances, various positions. Matthews watches with apparent interest, occasionally making comments to Williams or the other officers. At 0845, it's Luna's turn. She approaches the firing line with her Barrett, aware that every movement is being evaluated. Her setup is efficient, practiced, professional. She's done this routine so many times that her hands move automatically, even though her mind is screaming with anxiety. Chen's voice comes over the PA. "Staff Sergeant Valdez, you're cleared for long-range precision qualification. 3 shots at 1,000 meters, standard E-type targets. 1,000 meters, 200 meters farther than her previous qualification, at the extreme edge of the Barrett's effective range for precision work." Luna settles into position. Through her scope, she can see Matthews watching from the observation tower, binoculars raised. This isn't casual observation. This is assessment. She runs through her calculations. Wind at 3 miles per hour, variable direction. Temperature 76 degrees, rising. Humidity 48%. All minor factors at this distance, but they compound. More challenging, the tremor in her hands, barely noticeable but present. The way the crosshairs drift slightly, microsecond movements that shouldn't matter but do when precision is measured in inches at 1,000 meters. She forces her breathing into the rhythm that bypasses conscious thought. In through the nose, hold, out through the mouth. The pattern that slows her heart rate, that steadies her hands, that creates the physiological state necessary for extreme precision. The first shot breaks clean. Even as the round leaves the barrel, Luna knows it's off. Not by much, maybe 2 inches left of center, but enough. At this distance, against an evaluator like Matthews, enough matters. She doesn't have time to dwell. Second shot. Compensate for the first round's deviation. Account for the wind shift she's detecting through her scope's mirage reading. The shot breaks. Better. Center mass, good placement. Third shot. The one that determines whether her pattern shows consistency or just luck. But as Luna settles into the final shot, something shifts. Not in the wind, not in the temperature. In her head, the familiar sensation of her TBI asserting itself. Sound suddenly too sharp, light too bright. Her visual field fragmenting slightly at the edges. She's learned to shoot through this, has to shoot through this. Because stopping, because admitting that her neurological function is compromised would be the end of her career. She forces focus, the mathematical precision that's kept her alive through 4 deployments, the muscle memory deeper than conscious thought. The shot breaks. Through the scope, she sees the impact, center mass, tight grouping with the second shot. The first shot remains an outlier, but 2 out of 3 is solid performance. It's also not perfect. Chen's voice crackles over the PA. Valdez, 2 out of 3 center mass, 1 outlier. Marginal performance. Marginal. The word lands like a physical blow. 2 precision shots at 1,000 meters with a .50 caliber rifle, and it's characterized as marginal. Luna clears her weapon, performs the safety protocol, and steps away from the line. As she does, she catches sight of Matthews in the observation tower. He's not looking at the targets. He's looking at her, his expression unreadable. At 10:15, Luna stands outside the command building conference room. Her uniform is perfect, her bearing professional, but inside she's calculating the probability of career survival. The mathematics are grim. The door opens. Major Williams emerges, her expression carefully neutral. He's ready for you. Remember what I said. Direct, honest, competent. Williams lowers her voice. And Luna? He's read Chen's documentation. All of it. Luna enters the conference room. General Matthews sits at the head of the table, her personnel file open in front of him. The file is thick with the documentation of 6 years of service, though large sections are redacted. Black bars covering classified operations, unit assignments, mission details. Staff Sergeant Valdez, have a seat. Luna sits at attention, hands folded on the table. Matthews studies her for a moment, his gaze assessing. I've been reading your file. It's an interesting read, though reading is generous given how much is classified above my clearance level. Yes, sir. What I can see suggests you've had a non-standard career path, attachment to Special Operations Task Forces, multiple combat deployments, sniper qualified with an unusual specialty in ultra-long-range precision. He taps the file. And then, 6 months ago, a medical evaluation documenting traumatic brain injury. Mild, they've classified it, though I note you're on a treatment plan that suggests it's not particularly mild. Luna keeps her expression neutral. I'm managing my symptoms effectively, sir. Are you? Because Staff Sergeant Chen has documented multiple concerns about your reliability, your emotional stability, and your willingness to work within established command structures. Matthews flips through several pages. According to his assessment, you've been antagonistic, resistant to feedback, and potentially unsafe with weapon systems. Sir, I've passed every qualification, with marginal performance this morning. 2 out of 3 at a distance that's questionable for that weapon system. Matthews leans forward. Help me understand something, Staff Sergeant. You have a classified record that suggests exceptional skill. You have a medical profile that suggests impairment. And you have a chain of command that's expressing serious concerns about your continued service. Which version of you should I believe? Luna feels the familiar spike of cortisol, the hypervigilance that makes every conversation feel like a tactical situation, requiring perfect navigation. Sir, the version you should believe is the one demonstrated by 6 years of service, 4 combat deployments, and a record of mission effectiveness that's documented in the classified portions of my file, the portions I can't access. Yes, sir, but Major Williams has access. My previous commanding officers have access. The evaluation boards that reviewed my medical separation case had access. Luna pauses. What they found was that my skills remain intact, my judgment remains sound, and my performance, even with TBI, exceeds standard requirements. And yet Chen documents concerning behavior, emotional instability, difficulty with authority. Sir, with respect, Staff Sergeant Chen has been systematically creating barriers to my qualification requirements. He's questioned my medical clearances despite proper authorization. He's made comments suggesting my service record is fabricated. He's characterized my deployments as questionable despite their classification level indicating otherwise. Luna keeps her voice level. What he's documenting as emotional instability is my frustration with being treated as if my record is somehow suspicious rather than simply classified. Matthews is quiet for a long moment. Tell me about the TBI. How it happened. Luna had hoped to avoid this. The mission that gave her the injury is classified. The details can't be shared. But Matthews is asking, and refusing to answer would look like evasion. I was providing overwatch during a direct action mission. IED explosion. The pressure wave caught my position. She keeps it clinical, factual. I completed the mission before reporting symptoms. The delay in treatment contributed to the severity of the injury. You completed the mission despite being injured. The mission required precision fire. The injury didn't prevent me from providing that precision. This is the paradox she can't explain without revealing classified details. That she made the shot that justified her emblem while her brain was already damaged by the blast. That the shot itself was so technically difficult and strategically critical that mission commanders accepted her assessment that she could still perform. What are your symptoms now? Intermittent tremors, usually stress-related. Occasional migraines triggered by environmental factors. Fluorescent lights, loud noises. Some difficulty with sensory processing in high-stress environments. Luna lists them matter-of-factly, aware that each symptom is a potential reason for medical separation. All manageable. None that prevent me from performing my duties. Chen suggests otherwise. He suggests the tremors make you unsafe with weapons. Chen has never observed me in a combat environment. He's never seen my full qualification scores. He's making assumptions based on a medical diagnosis rather than demonstrated performance. Luna feels her control slipping slightly, the frustration bleeding through. Sir, I understand that TBI makes people uncomfortable. I understand that a female sniper with a classified record makes people uncomfortable. I understand that I'm not a conventional soldier with a conventional career path. But discomfort with my profile isn't the same as legitimate concerns about my capabilities. Matthew's expression shifts slightly. Not quite approval, but something like recognition. You're right that you make people uncomfortable. Do you know why? Because I don't fit the expected profile, sir. Partially, but also because you represent something the military hasn't fully figured out how to manage. Operators with significant trauma who remain technically proficient. We're good at binary decisions. Fit for duty or not fit. We're less good at the gray area where someone is injured but still capable, impaired but still excellent. Luna doesn't respond. This is the most honest assessment she's heard from anyone above the rank of major. Your classified record, the parts I can't see, they indicate something significant happened. Something that involved precision fire at distances that shouldn't be possible with your weapon system. Matthews watches her carefully. I can't ask about the details, but I can ask this. Was that shot before or after your injury? The question is more perceptive than Luna expected. Matthews has intuited what most evaluators miss, that her injury and her most significant professional achievement are connected. During, sir. The blast happened during the mission. The shot came after. Matthews absorbs this. So you made an impossible shot while your brain was already damaged? Yes, sir. Which suggests that your capabilities, even impaired, exceed standard operator levels. Or it suggests I got lucky, sir. Depending on how you want to interpret it. I don't believe in luck at that level of precision. Luck doesn't account for windage calculations, barometric pressure adjustments, and target movement prediction. Matthews closes her file. Here's my problem, Staff Sergeant. Your documented performance supports retention. Your medical profile suggests separation. And your chain of command is divided on whether you're an asset or a liability. I need to make a recommendation that serves both your welfare and the Army's readiness requirements. Luna feels the ground shifting beneath her. This is the moment where her career will be decided, not by her skills, not by her record, but by which framework Matthews chooses to apply. Sir, I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm asking to be evaluated based on performance rather than medical diagnosis. If I can't meet the standards, I should be separated. But if I'm meeting the standards despite the injury, then the injury itself shouldn't be the deciding factor. Except that the military has a responsibility to protect soldiers from themselves, to prevent people from pushing through injuries in ways that cause long-term harm. Matthews stands, walking to the window. I've seen too many operators destroy themselves trying to stay in service. They sacrifice their health, their relationships, their future well-being, because they can't imagine life outside the military. Is that what you're doing, Staff Sergeant? The question cuts deep because it's partially true. Luna has built her entire adult identity around being a sniper. The precision, the mathematics, the perfect execution of impossible shots. It's not just what she does, it's who she is. Without it, she's not sure what's left. Sir, I'm managing my symptoms with medical support. I'm in treatment. I'm following protocols. I'm not destroying myself. I'm adapting to a new baseline while maintaining mission effectiveness. And when that baseline deteriorates further, TBI is often progressive. What you can manage now might become unmanageable in 6 months, a year, 5 years. Then I'll be medically separated when I can't perform. But that's not now, sir. Right now, I'm capable. Right now, I'm mission effective. And right now, I'm being evaluated for separation, not because I'm failing, but because I make people uncomfortable. Matthews turns back to face her. You're right, and that's not fair. But fairness isn't always the deciding factor in retention decisions. He returns to his seat. I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. If you could go back, before the deployment, before the injury, would you still take the shot that gave you the TBI? Luna doesn't hesitate. Yes, sir. Even knowing the cost? The shot saved lives, sir. American lives. That calculation doesn't change based on what it cost me personally. Matthews nods slowly. That's the answer I expected. It's also the answer that concerns me, because it suggests you'll continue to sacrifice yourself for the mission regardless of the long-term consequences. Isn't that what we're trained to do, sir? We're trained to accomplish the mission while minimizing casualties, including our own. Matthews picks up a pen, makes a note in her file. I'm going to observe your next qualification, not the standard range work. I want to see you in a more complex scenario. Major Williams will coordinate the details. After that, I'll make my final recommendation. Luna feels a mixture of relief and dread, not an immediate separation, but also not a resolution. Another test, another performance, another opportunity to prove herself or fail. Yes, sir. When is this qualification scheduled? Tomorrow morning 0700. It will involve precision fire under simulated stress conditions at extended range. I want to see how you perform when your TBI symptoms are triggered. Matthews meets her eyes. I'm not trying to make you fail, Staff Sergeant. I'm trying to understand your actual capabilities versus your theoretical ones. There's often a significant gap. Understood, sir. Dismissed. Luna stands, salutes, and exits the conference room. In the hallway, Major Williams is waiting. How did it go? He's scheduling another qualification, tomorrow morning. Precision fire under stress conditions. Williams's expression tightens. He's testing whether your symptoms compromise your performance in realistic scenarios. Which they might. Which you need to manage. Williams gestures toward a quieter corner of the hallway. Luna, Matthews is actually being more fair than most generals would be. He's giving you a chance to demonstrate capability rather than just accepting Chen's documentation. But that means tomorrow's performance matters more than anything you've done in the past 6 months. What kind of stress conditions? I don't know yet, but knowing Matthews, it will be designed to trigger exactly the symptoms you're trying to manage. Loud noises, time pressure, environmental chaos. Williams pauses. Can you do this? Luna thinks about her sessions with Dr. Keegan, about the coping mechanisms they've developed, about the reality that stress makes her symptoms worse, and that's exactly what tomorrow will test. I don't know, but I'm going to try. That might not be enough. It's what I have. Williams looks at her for a long moment. Get some rest. Use your coping strategies. And Luna, whatever happens tomorrow, know that you've already proven yourself. This test isn't about your value as a soldier. It's about whether the military can accommodate your value despite your injury. Luna nods. But she knows the distinction doesn't matter. If she fails tomorrow, the reason won't change the result. She leaves the command building and drives to her apartment. It's only 11:30, but she feels exhausted. The kind of exhaustion that comes from maintaining perfect control under impossible circumstances. Her phone buzzes. A text from Dr. Keegan. Heard about tomorrow's test. Call if you need to talk. Luna almost calls. Almost reaches out for the support that might help her manage what's coming. But if she talks to Dr. Keegan now, if she admits how scared she is, she might break down in a way that leaves her unable to rebuild before tomorrow. Instead, she runs through calculations. Wind patterns at 0700, temperature gradients, ballistic coefficients, the math that grounds her when everything else feels unstable. Luna doesn't sleep. By 0400, she's given up pretending and drives to the base. The guard at the gate looks surprised to see her so early, but waves her through after checking her credentials. The range is dark and empty. Luna sits in her truck, watching the eastern horizon gradually lighten, and tries to prepare mentally for whatever Matthews has planned. At 0630, vehicles begin arriving. Not just range personnel, a full technical crew with equipment Luna doesn't immediately recognize. Portable speakers, strobe lights, what looks like pyrotechnic simulators. Major Williams approaches Luna's truck. They're setting up a stress course, audio and visual stimulation designed to simulate combat conditions. Williams's voice is grim. Matthews wants to see how you perform when your TBI symptoms are actively triggered. Luna feels her stomach drop. This isn't just a qualification. It's a targeted test of her weakest points. That's not standard evaluation protocol. No, it's not. But Matthews has authority to design custom assessments for complex retention decisions. Williams hands Luna a water bottle. Hydrate. Manage your symptoms as best you can. And remember, this is about demonstrating that you can still function even when impaired, not that you're unimpaired. At 0700, Matthews arrives. He's accompanied by Chen, who looks almost gleeful at the setup. Also present, a medical officer Luna doesn't recognize, probably here to document any signs of neurological distress. Matthews gathers everyone at the range control building. This morning's evaluation is designed to assess Staff Sergeant Valdez's capability to perform precision fire under realistic combat stress. The course includes audio simulation of combat noise, gunfire, explosions, radio chatter, visual simulation including strobe effects and smoke, and a time pressure element requiring rapid target acquisition and engagement. Luna listens, her mind already racing through the implications. Every element Matthews described is specifically designed to trigger her TBI symptoms. Loud noises that fragment her auditory processing, strobes that trigger migraines, time pressure that increases her tremors. Staff Sergeant Valdez will engage 6 targets at ranges from 600 to 1200 meters. She'll have 90 seconds per target from the moment it's illuminated. Any questions? Luna has dozens of questions, but asking them would sound like making excuses. No, sir. Good. Take your position. Luna moves to the designated firing lane. Her Barrett is already set up, checked and rechecked 3 times before dawn. She settles into position, running through her final mental calculations. The course begins. Immediately, sound slams into her from every direction. Recorded gunfire at combat volume. Explosions. Someone screaming on a radio. The audio isn't just loud. It's specifically designed to create chaos, to make concentration impossible. Luna's auditory processing fractures immediately. Instead of distinct sounds, she hears fragmented noise, pieces of audio that don't assemble into coherent information. Her heart rate spikes. Her hands begin to shake. Through her scope, the first target illuminates. 600 meters, center lane. She forces her breathing into the pattern Dr. Keegan taught her, counts backward from 10, tries to isolate the mathematical precision from the sensory chaos. The crosshairs drift. She compensates, forces them steady, but the tremor in her hands makes perfect stability impossible. 45 seconds elapsed. She makes the shot. Through the scope, she sees the impact. Off-center, but within the target zone. No time to assess. The second target illuminates 800 meters, left lane. The strobes start now, rapid flashing lights that turn her vision into a series of still images rather than continuous motion. Her migraine triggers instantly, a spike of pain behind her right eye that makes her vision blur. She blinks rapidly, trying to clear her sight. The target wavers in her scope. 60 seconds elapsed. She adjusts for wind based on calculations she can barely maintain through the pain. The shot breaks. Impact. Marginal. Barely in the target zone. Third target. 1,000 meters. Right lane. Maximum wind exposure. The smoke simulators activate. Dense fog rolls across the range, obscuring her sight lines. She has to wait for gaps in the smoke, timing her shot for the brief moments of visibility. 75 seconds elapsed. The shot breaks during a smoke gap. She doesn't see the impact through the obscuration. Fourth target, 1,000 meters, center lane. Luna's symptoms are fully activated now. Her hands shake visibly. Her vision fragments at the edges. Sound is pain. Light is pain. Every sensory input feels like an assault, but underneath the chaos there's muscle memory. The mathematics deeper than conscious thought. The training that's been repeated so many times it's reflexive. 55 seconds elapsed. She makes the shot. Can't see the impact through the smoke and strobes. Fifth target, 1,200 meters, left lane, maximum difficulty. Luna's breathing is ragged. Her heart pounds. Every symptom Dr. Keegan has documented is present and amplified. If anyone is watching her hands, her face, her body language, they're seeing clear evidence of neurological distress, but she's still in the fight. She runs the calculations one more time. Wind at 4 miles per hour, temperature 82 degrees, humidity rising, distance at the extreme edge of reliable precision for this weapon system. 80 seconds elapsed. The shot breaks. Final target, 1,200 meters, right lane. Same difficulty, but she has less than 90 seconds and she's already exhausted. Luna closes her eyes for 3 seconds, forces her entire system to reset, opens them and acquires the target. The mathematics take over. Wind correction, drop compensation, lead calculation for the simulated movement. 85 seconds elapsed. The shot breaks. The course ends. The audio chaos stops. The strobes shut off. The smoke begins to clear. Luna remains in position, her hands shaking violently now that she's not forcing them steady. Her vision swims. The migraine is fully established, a crushing pain that makes thinking difficult. She performed, but she looked impaired doing it. Matthews approaches with the medical officer and Chen. Through her blurred vision, Luna sees them examining a tablet, probably the target assessment data. Staff Sergeant Valdez, clear your weapon and stand. Luna complies, though standing requires more effort than she wants to show. The medical officer steps forward. I need to conduct a brief neurological check. For the next 5 minutes, Luna endures standard TBI assessment protocols, following a light with her eyes, walking a straight line, reciting sequences of numbers. Every test designed to reveal neurological impairment. She passes, but barely. Her eyes track the light with slight delays. Her balance on the line is imperfect. The numbers take longer to recall than they should. Matthews watches this entire assessment in silence. Finally, the medical officer steps back. Symptoms consistent with documented TBI. Acute stress response evident. No signs of immediate danger, but clear indication of neurological compromise under pressure. Chen's satisfaction is visible. This is exactly the documentation he's wanted. Proof that Luna's injury makes her unreliable under stress. Matthews looks at the target data on the tablet. All 6 targets engaged within time limits. 4 solid hits, 2 marginal hits. No complete misses. Luna processes this. 4 out of 6 is passing. Not excellent, but passing. Under conditions specifically designed to trigger her worst symptoms, she still accomplished the mission. Staff Sergeant, you're dismissed. I'll review the full assessment and provide my recommendation by 1400. Luna salutes and walks back to her truck. Every step feels like moving through concrete. The migraine has intensified to the point where she can barely see. Her hands shake so badly she can barely grip the steering wheel. She drives to her apartment on autopilot, makes it inside, closes the blackout curtains, and collapses on her bed with an ice pack pressed against her skull. Her phone buzzes. Multiple texts from Major Williams asking for status. Luna can't look at the screen. The light is agony. She shuts off the phone and surrenders to the pain. When she wakes, it's 13:30. 30 minutes before Matthews announces his decision. Luna forces herself upright, swallows medication that will barely touch the migraine, and drives back to base. Her vision is still compromised, her balance still off, but she needs to be present for the recommendation. She arrives at the command building at 13:55. Major Williams meets her at the entrance. You look terrible. I'm functional. Barely. Williams guides her to a conference room. Matthews reviewed everything. The target data, the medical assessment, Chen's documentation, your service record. He's about to announce his recommendation to the division commander. What do you think he'll say? Williams hesitates. I think he's caught between respecting your capabilities and acknowledging that you clearly struggle under stress. The question is, which factor he weights more heavily? At 1400, Matthews enters the conference room. Also present, the division commander, Colonel Sarah Reeves, Chen, the medical officer, and several other staff members Luna doesn't recognize. I've completed my evaluation of Staff Sergeant Luna Valdez, Matthews begins. My recommendation is based on 3 factors: demonstrated capability, medical status, and mission requirements. Luna forces herself to focus, despite the migraine pain. Staff Sergeant Valdez's classified service record indicates exceptional skills as a precision marksman. Her unclassified qualifications support this assessment. However, her traumatic brain injury creates significant complications. Here it comes. The recommendation for medical separation. The end of her career based on symptoms that are real but manageable. This morning's stress evaluation revealed that Valdez experiences pronounced neurological symptoms when exposed to combat-realistic conditions, tremors, visual disturbances, cognitive delays, all documented by our medical officer. Chen's expression is triumphant. This is the outcome he's wanted. However, Matthews continues, despite these symptoms, Staff Sergeant Valdez successfully engaged all 6 targets within time limits. Her performance, while impaired, still met mission requirements. 4 solid hits at extreme range under adverse conditions represents capability that exceeds standard operator levels. Luna feels something shift in the room, a realization that this might not be the straightforward separation Chen expected. "My recommendation is conditional retention," Matthews says. "Staff Sergeant Valdez will remain in service with the following stipulations: monthly medical evaluations to monitor TBI progression, assignment to roles that allow symptom management, and quarterly performance assessments to ensure continued capability." Luna processes this. Not separation, but not vindication either. Conditional retention, a probationary status that acknowledges both her skills and her limitations. However, I'm also recommending an investigation into the command climate in Staff Sergeant Valdez's unit. Specifically, I want to review Staff Sergeant Chen's documentation and his interactions with Valdez to determine if the issues she's faced are medical in nature or if they're being exacerbated by hostile command environment. Chen's expression shifts from triumph to concern. Additionally, I'm directing that Valdez's classified service record be reviewed by personnel with appropriate clearances. If her record supports the conclusions I suspect it does, then her retention should be prioritized regardless of her medical complications. Matthews looks directly at Luna. "Staff Sergeant, your performance this morning demonstrated something important, that you can still accomplish the mission even when significantly impaired. That's rare. It's also valuable. The military needs operators who can function in degraded states, who can push through injury and distress to complete critical tasks." He pauses. "But you also need to accept that you're injured, that managing your symptoms isn't weakness. It's prerequisite for continued service. If you try to hide your injury, if you refuse treatment out of fear of documentation, you will eventually fail in ways that end your career and possibly harm others." Luna nods, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. "Do you accept these conditions?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Major Williams will coordinate your medical monitoring and reassignment details." "Dismissed." Luna stands, salutes, and exits the room. In the hallway, her legs nearly give out. Major Williams catches her elbow. "Steady. You made it. Conditional retention isn't exactly a win. It's not a loss either. And the investigation into Chen, that's significant." Matthews saw through the documentation to the hostile environment underneath. Williams guides Luna toward a quiet office. "Sit. Breathe. Let this settle." Luna sits, her head pounding, her hands shaking, her entire system in revolt against what she's just endured. But she's still in service, still a soldier, still capable of the thing she's spent 6 years perfecting. 3 days later, Luna reports to a different office at Fort Bragg. She's been told only that someone wants to meet with her regarding her service record, someone with the appropriate clearances to discuss the classified portions. Major Williams accompanies her, which suggests this meeting is significant. They're ushered into a secure conference room. Waiting inside is a man Luna doesn't recognize. Civilian clothes, late 40s, with the kind of bearing that suggests military background even without the uniform. "Staff Sergeant Valdez, I'm David Morrison, liaison to JSOC. He gestures to seats. "I've reviewed your complete service record, including the classified portions. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about what you actually did and what it cost you." Luna glances at Williams, who nods slightly. "This is authorized disclosure. I'm cleared to discuss your attachment to Task Force Iron during Operation Resolute Dawn, specifically your role in the mission that took place in the Coast Province on November 17, 2024. The date lands like a physical blow. Luna hasn't spoken about that mission to anyone except the debrief team immediately afterward and Dr. Keegan in heavily sanitized terms. The mission required precision fire at a distance that exceeded standard operational parameters. The target was a high-value individual coordinating attacks against U.S. forces. The window for engagement was less than 3 minutes. The shot was 3,200 meters in mountainous terrain with variable wind conditions. Morrison pulls up a file on his tablet. "According to the mission debrief, you made that shot despite having sustained a traumatic brain injury from an IED blast 90 minutes earlier. The blast occurred during your insertion. You reported minor symptoms, headache, slight disorientation, but assessed yourself as mission capable." Luna remembers every second of that mission, the climb to the observation post, her head pounding from the blast. The way sound seemed fragmented, her vision slightly off. The calculation she ran 3 times because her mental processing was slower than normal. The shot was successful. The target was eliminated. The mission was accomplished. Morrison looks up from the tablet. But the medical evaluation afterward revealed that you'd sustained a moderate to severe TBI. The pressure wave from the IED had caused diffuse axonal injury. By making that shot, by subjecting yourself to the repeated recoil of the Barrett under those conditions, you significantly worsened your injury. This is the part Luna has never fully articulated, that the shot that proved her capabilities was also the shot that broke her. The mission commanders faced a choice. Morrison continues. Acknowledge that you made a technically brilliant shot while medically compromised, which would raise questions about why you weren't immediately pulled from the field, or classify the entire mission at a level that prevents most people from knowing the details, which protects the operational security but also means your achievement can't be properly recognized. They chose classification, Luna says quietly. They chose classification. Which means that when you returned stateside with a TBI and started facing questions about your capabilities, there was no way to defend yourself without revealing information that remains classified. So Staff Sergeant Chen, General Matthews, they don't know. They know you were attached to Special Operations. They know you have a classified record, but they don't know that you made one of the most difficult shots in modern military history while your brain was actively damaged. Morrison closes the tablet. I'm here to tell you that's going to change. Luna feels something shift, hope, maybe, or just the relief of finally being believed. JSOC is requesting that certain details of your record be declassified. Not the full mission, that remains protected, but enough information to establish that your skills are documented at the highest levels, that your injury occurred in combat during an active mission, and that your performance, even while injured, exceeded exceptional standards. Why now? Because General Matthews' investigation into your command climate revealed a pattern that JSOC finds concerning. Operators with classified records and combat injuries being systematically pushed out of service by conventional commanders who don't understand what they're dealing with. Morrison leans forward. You're not the first. You're not even the only one currently fighting retention. But your case is particularly egregious because Chen specifically questioned whether your record was fabricated. Luna thinks about the 6 months of doubt, the constant implication that she was somehow lying about her service. What happens to Chen? That's being addressed. What I need from you is consent to limited declassification. The information will be released only to personnel with need-to-know clearance, but it will be enough to establish your credibility beyond question. Luna considers this. Part of her wants the validation, wants every person who doubted her to know exactly what she accomplished. But another part understands that the mission itself, the details of that shot, are connected to losses she'd rather not revisit. The mission resulted in casualties, Luna says carefully. Other operators were wounded during the insertion. 3 wounded, 1 KIA. I know. The casualty reports are part of the classified record. Morrison's voice softens. Your shot prevented further casualties. The target you eliminated was coordinating a complex attack that would have hit our forces within hours. You saved lives, at the cost of my brain function, at the cost of worsening an injury you'd already sustained. The question is whether that trade-off was worth it. Morrison pauses. The mission commanders thought so. They approved your recommendation for the JSOC Presidential Unit citation. That citation is part of what we're proposing to declassify. Luna closes her eyes. The citation she received at a classified ceremony, witnessed only by other operators and senior leadership. The emblem she wore for 1 day before being told it couldn't be displayed publicly. If we declassify, then what? I'm validated, but I'm still injured. I still have tremors. I still get migraines. I still can't process certain sensory inputs without neurological distress. You're still injured, Morrison agrees, but you're injured while being one of the most capable precision marksmen in the current force. That distinction matters. It means we find ways to accommodate your injury rather than discard your capabilities. Major Williams speaks for the first time. JSOC is proposing a new assignment, training role specifically focused on ultra-long-range precision techniques. You'd be teaching the next generation of snipers the methods you perfected. Less field work, more controlled environments. Positions that allow you to manage your symptoms while contributing your expertise. Luna absorbs this. Not a return to operational status. Her medical profile likely prevents that, but not erasure either. A role that acknowledges what she knows, what she's accomplished, what she can still offer despite her limitations. What about the conditional retention? Matthews's stipulations would remain in effect: monthly medical monitoring, quarterly assessments. But instead of fighting for your right to stay in service, you'd be working from a position where your value is established and your injury is accommodated. Morrison slides a document across the table. This is the consent form for limited declassification. Take time to review it. Talk to your medical team. Make sure you understand what you're agreeing to. Luna picks up the document. The language is dense, legal, specific. But the core is simple. She's granting permission for her classified record to be reviewed by personnel involved in her retention decisions. If I sign this, then what happens to the emblem? The emblem remains classified. The shot itself remains classified. But the fact that you earned a high-level commendation for precision fire during combat operations, that can be acknowledged. Morrison meets her eyes. You won't be able to tell the full story, but you'll be able to point to official documentation that proves the story exists. Luna thinks about Chen, about the 6 months of doubt, about every person who looked at her and saw a female soldier with a TBI rather than an operator with a documented record of excellence. She signs the consent form. 2 weeks later, Luna reports to her new assignment at the Marksmanship Training Center at Fort Benning. It's a different kind of pressure. No more Chen, no more hostile command climate, but also the weight of being designated as a subject matter expert while still managing symptoms that make some days almost impossible. Her first class consists of 12 soldiers selected for advanced sniper training. They're talented, motivated, and skeptical. A female staff sergeant with a visible medical profile teaching elite precision techniques is not what they expected. Luna addresses this directly in her opening remarks. My name is Staff Sergeant Luna Valdez. I have a traumatic brain injury sustained during combat operations. I have visible tremors. I get migraines that sometimes require me to halt instruction. If you think this makes me unqualified to teach this course, you're welcome to request a different instructor. No one moves. Good, because what you're going to learn here isn't about being uninjured. It's about being effective despite impairment. Every one of you will eventually operate in degraded states: exhaustion, dehydration, environmental extremes, possibly injury. The question isn't whether you can shoot perfectly when everything is optimal. It's whether you can shoot well enough when nothing is optimal. She pulls up a slide showing ballistic calculations. Ultra-long-range precision isn't about having the steadiest hands or the clearest vision. It's about understanding the mathematics so deeply that you can execute them even when your body is failing. It's about building systems, mental, physical, procedural, that function when you can't rely on perfect physiological conditions. One of the students raises a hand. Staff Sergeant, what's the longest shot you've made? Luna considers how to answer this. The specific distance remains classified, but Morrison's declassification has given her some room to acknowledge the general parameters. At a distance where wind drift was measured in meters, not inches, where the bullet's flight time was long enough that target movement became a significant variable, where atmospheric conditions changed between when I fired and when the round impacted. She pauses, and I made it while managing symptoms from a combat injury that had occurred less than 2 hours earlier. The room is silent. This is the validation Morrison promised. Not the full story, but enough of it to establish credibility. The point isn't to replicate that specific shot. The point is to develop the skills that make that level of performance possible even under adverse circumstances. Luna advances to the next slide. We're going to start with environmental assessment, understanding wind not just as a number on an anemometer, but as a three-dimensional flow that varies with terrain, temperature, and altitude. Over the next 3 hours, Luna teaches the mathematics she's internalized over 6 years. She teaches the students how to read mirage, how to interpret vegetation movement, how to build mental models of bullet trajectory that account for dozens of variables simultaneously. Her hands shake periodically. She pauses twice when the fluorescent lights trigger the beginning of a migraine, adjusting the lighting to something more manageable. The students notice, but they also notice that the quality of instruction doesn't diminish when she manages her symptoms. At the end of the session, one of the students, a specialist named Rodriguez, who's shown particular aptitude, approaches her. Staff Sergeant, can I ask something that might be out of line? Ask. Does it ever get better? The injury, I mean. Do you ever get back to what you were before? Luna appreciates the honesty. No. TBI doesn't heal the way a broken bone heals. You adapt. You develop workarounds. You learn to recognize your limitations and operate within them. She meets Rodriguez's eyes. But here's what I've learned. Adaptation is a skill. The ability to maintain performance despite impairment is something you can train. It's not about ignoring the injury. It's about integrating the injury into your operational baseline. That sounds exhausting. It is. Some days I wake up and the idea of managing my symptoms for another 16 hours feels impossible. But the alternative is accepting that the injury defines my limits, and I'm not willing to do that. Rodriguez nods slowly. Thank you for being honest about it. After the student leaves, Luna sits alone in the empty classroom. The day has been successful by objective measures. Content delivered, students engaged, no major symptom episodes. But she's also exhausted in a way that goes beyond physical tiredness. Her phone buzzes. A text from Dr. Keegan. How was the first day? Luna considers her response. She could say it was fine, could minimize the difficulty, but Keegan has earned honesty. Harder than expected, not the teaching, the being visible, everyone watching to see if the injured instructor can actually perform. Keegan's response comes quickly. And did you? Yes, but I'm not sure how sustainable this is long term. That's what the monthly evaluations will assess. For now, focus on today. You taught. You managed your symptoms. You showed those students that injury doesn't equal incapacity. Luna pockets her phone and begins packing her materials. She's scheduled for another session tomorrow, then 3 more days of consecutive instruction before a break. The tempo is manageable, but only if she's rigorous about self-care, sleep, medication compliance, avoiding triggers when possible. As she's leaving the building, she encounters a colonel she doesn't recognize. He's older, maybe late 50s, with the combat infantry badge and several deployment patches. Staff Sergeant Valdez? Yes, sir. Colonel Patterson, I was asked to observe your session today. He gestures toward the now empty classroom. I wanted to introduce myself before you heard through unofficial channels that someone was evaluating you. Luna feels the familiar spike of anxiety. Another evaluation, another assessment, another opportunity to be found wanting. What's the purpose of the evaluation, sir? JSOC is considering expanding the training program you're piloting, teaching operators how to maintain performance in degraded states, physical injury, environmental extremes, prolonged stress. Your approach is unique. They want to know if it's replicable with other instructors. Patterson's expression softens slightly. I'm not here to judge your medical fitness. That's been established. I'm here to assess whether your methods can be systematized. You were in the classroom? Observation booth. You wouldn't have seen me. He pulls out a tablet. I have about 40 pages of notes. Your integration of mathematical precision with physiological management is sophisticated. The way you modeled symptom management without hiding the struggle. That's pedagogically powerful. Luna processes this. She'd taught the session assuming she was alone with her students, unaware that her methods were being documented and assessed. Sir, with respect, I'm not sure what I do is replicable. I'm managing a specific injury with specific symptoms. Other operators have different challenges, which is exactly why we need a systematic approach. You've developed techniques for maintaining precision under neurological impairment. Those techniques can be adapted for other impairments: visual, auditory, musculoskeletal. The core principle is the same. Build robust systems that function when optimal conditions aren't available. Patterson closes his tablet. I'll be observing intermittently over the next few weeks. My preliminary assessment will go to JSOC, and they'll decide whether to expand the program. No pressure. Just teach the way you taught today. He walks away, leaving Luna with the realization that her struggle to remain in service has somehow transformed into being a test case for a new training methodology. That evening, Luna meets with Major Williams at a coffee shop off base. It's become their informal debrief routine, a way to discuss the complexities of Luna's situation without the formality of office meetings. Patterson observed today, Luna says without preamble. I know. JSOC informed me he'd be conducting assessments. Williams sips her coffee. How do you feel about it? Like I'm a research subject instead of an instructor. You're both. That's the reality of being a pioneer. Williams leans forward. Luna, do you understand what's happening? You're not just fighting for your own retention anymore. You're potentially changing how the military approaches injured operators. If Patterson's assessment is positive, if JSOC adopts this training model, you'll have created a pathway for dozens, maybe hundreds of soldiers who would otherwise be pushed out. Luna hadn't thought about it in those terms. She'd been focused on her own survival, her own career, her own need to prove that injury doesn't equal incapacity. What if I can't sustain it? What if I have a bad episode during one of Patterson's observations? Then you manage it professionally, the way you did when the lights triggered your migraine today. Patterson isn't looking for perfection. He's looking for functional resilience, the ability to adapt and continue despite setbacks. Luna thinks about Rodriguez's question, does it ever get better? And her own answer, you adapt. There's something else, Williams says. The investigation into Chen concluded. He's being reassigned, not punished exactly, but removed from positions where he has authority over operators with classified records or complex medical profiles. What did they find? Pattern of behavior. You weren't the first soldier Chen targeted with excessive scrutiny. You were just the first one with enough documentation and high-level support to push back effectively. Williams' expression hardens. He built a career on being a gatekeeper, on using his position to make life difficult for soldiers who didn't fit his narrow definition of acceptable. That's over now. Luna feels a complex mix of vindication and anger. Vindication because the hostile environment is finally acknowledged. Anger because it took 6 months, a general's intervention, and a JSOC investigation to stop something that should never have been permitted in the first place. Will he face formal discipline? Unlikely. His actions were within the technical bounds of his authority. He didn't violate specific regulations. He just used his discretion in ways that created a hostile environment. That's hard to prove in a formal disciplinary process. Williams pauses, but his career is effectively stalled. He won't advance. He won't get choice assignments. And his reputation among senior leadership is damaged. It's not justice, not really, but it's something. Over the next 3 weeks, Luna settles into the rhythm of instruction. Some days are good. Her symptoms are manageable. Her teaching is sharp. Her students make visible progress. Other days are brutal. Migraines that last hours. Tremors that make demonstrating techniques difficult. Fatigue that makes coherent thought feel like pushing through mud. On the brutal days, she teaches her students the most important lesson: how to function anyway. This is day 16 of the course, Luna tells her class one morning when her hands are shaking visibly. I'm having a bad symptom day. You're going to see me struggle with demonstrations. You're going to see me pause to manage pain. You're going to see what operating in a degraded state actually looks like. She proceeds to teach a session on wind reading, her voice occasionally tight with discomfort, but her content unchanged. The students watch her work through calculations despite visible tremors, adjust her position to minimize migraine intensity, and maintain instructional quality through sheer determination. After the session, Rodriguez approaches again. Staff Sergeant, that was the most valuable class we've had. Luna looks at him skeptically. I was barely functional. Exactly. You showed us that barely functional is still mission capable if you have the right systems. You showed us that acknowledging struggle isn't the same as surrendering to it. Rodriguez hesitates. Most of our previous instructors presented an image of perfection. Be like me, they said, and you'll be excellent. You're showing us that excellence isn't about being perfect. It's about being effective even when you're far from perfect. Luna realizes Rodriguez is right. Her injury, her struggle, her visible imperfection, these aren't weaknesses in the instructional context. They're teaching tools. After the students leave, Colonel Patterson emerges from the observation booth. That session should be required viewing for every senior leader in the military. His voice carries genuine respect. You just demonstrated that the binary we've been using, fit for duty or not fit, is fundamentally flawed. You're not fit for duty by conventional standards, but you're extraordinarily effective despite that. Sir, I'm not sure that lesson transfers to other contexts. Precision shooting is specific. The lesson transfers to every context where we expect humans to perform, despite impairment, which is most combat environments and a lot of operational settings. Patterson sits across from her. My preliminary assessment is going to recommend program expansion. JSOC wants to establish a training cadre focused on degraded state operations. You'd be the primary instructor, training other NCOs to teach these methods. Luna feels overwhelmed. Sir, I'm still figuring out how to manage my own symptoms. I'm not ready to train others to train others. You're more ready than you think. And you won't be doing it alone. We'd build a team. Medical specialists, other operators with managed injuries, subject matter experts in various domains. Patterson pulls out his tablet. This would be a new MOS pathway. Resilience training specialist. Operators who've sustained injuries but retained expertise, teaching the next generation how to function in imperfect conditions. An MOS for broken soldiers. An MOS for soldiers who understand that combat breaks everyone eventually. The question is whether you can still accomplish the mission after you're broken. Patterson meets her eyes. That emblem you're not allowed to wear publicly, the 3,200-meter shot, you made that while broken. That's not a disqualification. That's proof of concept. Luna sits with this. For 6 months, she's been fighting to prove that her injury doesn't disqualify her from service. Now Patterson is suggesting that her injury is precisely what qualifies her for this new role. What's the timeline? 6 months to pilot the program, assess effectiveness, refine methodology. If successful, we'd implement across the force within 2 years. Patterson stands. Think about it. Talk to your medical team. Talk to Dr. Keegan. But understand that this is a rare opportunity to transform your struggle into something that helps others. After Patterson leaves, Luna sits alone in the empty classroom. She thinks about the students she's taught, about Rodriguez's insight that struggle openly acknowledged is more valuable than perfection performed. She thinks about Chen, about the 6 months of being told she was deficient, about the systematic erosion of her confidence and competence. She thinks about General Matthews, about his willingness to see past the binary of fit or not fit, to the more complex reality of degraded but effective. Most of all, she thinks about the shot, 3,200 meters, variable wind, mountainous terrain, target movement, and her own brain already damaged by an IED blast 90 minutes earlier. She'd made that shot not because she was perfect, but because she'd built systems, mental, physical, procedural, that functioned even when she was far from perfect, the mathematics that bypassed conscious thought, the muscle memory deeper than words, the training repeated so many times that impairment couldn't completely disrupt execution. That shot cost her. The recoil through her already damaged brain, the cognitive effort of maintaining calculations while her neurological function was compromised, the simple fact of choosing mission over medical need, all of it contributed to worsening her injury from moderate to severe. But that shot also saved lives. American operators who would have been hit by the attack the target was coordinating, Afghan allies who were in the target zone, the mission success that justified the tactical risk. Luna has never been sure if the trade-off was worth it, whether accomplishing the mission justified the permanent damage to her brain, the tremors she'll manage for the rest of her life, the migraines that turn some days into lost time. But sitting in this classroom thinking about Rodriguez and the other students who watched her struggle and learned from it, she begins to understand that worth isn't a binary calculation. The shot cost her brain function. The shot saved lives. Both things are true. Both things matter. And now potentially her injury could create a pathway for other operators to remain in service despite their own damage, could transform the military's understanding of what it means to be functional, could prove that broken doesn't mean useless. That trade-off at least feels worth it. Luna pulls out her phone and texts Dr. Keegan. Need to talk about the program expansion. Complex feelings about becoming the poster child for broken but functional. Keegan's response is immediate. You're not broken. You're adapted. Big difference. Let's talk tomorrow. Luna appreciates the reframing, even if she's not sure she believes it yet. Adapted, not broken. Functional in a different way rather than dysfunctional in the expected way. She packs her materials and heads to her car. Tomorrow she'll teach again. The day after, she'll undergo her monthly medical evaluation. Next week, Patterson will deliver his preliminary assessment to JSOC. The future is uncertain in ways both terrifying and potentially transformative. 3 months later, Luna stands in a different conference room at Fort Bragg. Present are General Matthews, Colonel Patterson, David Morrison from JSOC, Major Williams, and Dr. Keegan. Also present, via secure video link, is a 3-star general Luna doesn't recognize. Staff Sergeant Valdez, Matthews begins, we've gathered to discuss several interrelated matters regarding your service. First, Colonel Patterson's assessment of the pilot training program. Patterson stands. The pilot program exceeded expectations. Staff Sergeant Valdez trained 12 students in ultra-long-range precision techniques with emphasis on degraded state operations. All 12 passed advanced qualifications. More significantly, feedback indicates that the training changed how these operators think about performance under impairment. He displays metrics on a screen: accuracy rates, completion times, student evaluations, all positive. Based on these results, JSOC is approving program expansion. We're establishing a training cadre focused on resilience and degraded state operations. Staff Sergeant Valdez will serve as lead instructor, training other NCOs to teach these methods. Luna had known this was coming. Patterson had briefed her last week, but hearing it officially announced makes it real. Second matter, Matthews continues, concerns the declassification request submitted by Mr. Morrison. The request has been approved at the highest levels. Certain details of Staff Sergeant Valdez's service record will be released to personnel with appropriate need-to-know clearance. Morrison takes over. Specifically, we're releasing information about your attachment to Task Force Iron, the circumstances of your injury, and the general parameters, not the specific details, of the mission that earned you the JSOC Presidential Unit citation. Luna's stomach tightens. The mission she's never discussed publicly is about to become part of her official record. This declassification serves two purposes, Morrison continues. First, it establishes definitively that your classified service record is not fabricated or inflated. Second, it provides context for your injury, that it occurred during an active mission while you were performing duties at the highest levels of precision required by our Special Operations Forces. The three-star general on the video screen speaks for the first time. Luna recognizes him now. General William Hargrove, commander of JSOC. Staff Sergeant Valdez, I've reviewed your complete record, including mission debriefs that remain classified. What you accomplished in Coast Province represents one of the most technically difficult shots in modern military history. The fact that you made it while managing a combat injury makes it even more remarkable. Luna doesn't know how to respond to this. Acknowledgement from the commander of JSOC is not something she anticipated. However, Hargrove continues, I'm troubled by what happened afterward. You sustained a severe injury in the service of a critical mission. Instead of receiving recognition and support, you spent 6 months fighting to prove that your injury didn't disqualify you from service. That's a failure, not on your part, but on ours. The room is silent. We're implementing policy changes. Operators with combat-related injuries and classified service records will be flagged for special handling and retention decisions. Their cases will be reviewed by personnel with appropriate clearances who understand the context of their service. We're also creating an appeals process for soldiers who believe they've been unfairly targeted due to medical profiles connected to combat injuries. Hargrove looks directly at Luna through the video screen. These changes won't help you. You've already fought your battle. But they'll help the operators who come after you. That's the legacy of what you've been through. Luna realizes she's being told that her struggle had purpose beyond her own career, that the system is changing because of what she endured. Third matter, Matthews says, picking up a small case from the table. Staff Sergeant Valdez, you've been wearing an unauthorized emblem for the past several months. An emblem that represents a classified achievement that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. Luna's breath catches. She thought she'd removed the emblem before anyone important noticed. I noticed it the first day I observed your qualification, Matthews continues. A small reticle with numbers most people wouldn't recognize. 3,200 members. I didn't understand the significance at the time. I do now. He opens the case. Inside is the emblem, her emblem. But it's been officially manufactured rather than the unit-issued version she'd been wearing. This emblem is now authorized for your uniform. The achievement it represents has been validated through the declassification process. You earned it. You're permitted to display it. Matthews hands her the case. Luna takes it with shaking hands. Additionally, you're being awarded the Army Commendation Medal with Valor device for your actions during the Coast Province mission. The citation will be partially redacted, but it will document that you maintained operational effectiveness despite combat injury and accomplished a mission-critical task under extreme conditions. Luna stares at the emblem. Such a small thing, a stylized reticle with numbers barely visible, but it represents everything she's fought for. Validation of her skills, acknowledgement of her sacrifice, proof that her record is real. Thank you, sir, she manages. Don't thank me. You earned this through performance and through persistence. What happened to you over the past 6 months should never have happened. The fact that it did represents a systemic failure we're working to correct. Matthews's expression softens slightly. How are you managing your symptoms? Some days are better than others, sir. The migraines are less frequent with medication adjustments. The tremors persist but are manageable. I'm learning to work within my limitations. That's all we can ask. Continue with your medical monitoring. Continue with Dr. Keegan's treatment plan. And continue teaching, because what you're doing matters. Dr. Keegan speaks up. If I may add a medical perspective, Staff Sergeant Valdez's progress over the past 3 months has been significant, not in terms of symptom reduction, but in terms of integration. She's developed sophisticated coping mechanisms that allow her to function at high levels despite ongoing impairment. That's the model we need for other operators with similar injuries. The meeting continues for another 30 minutes, covering administrative details about the new training program, the declassification process, and Luna's upcoming schedule. But Luna barely processes it. She's focused on the emblem in her hands, the physical proof that her service was real and valued. After the meeting, Luna walks out of the building with Major Williams. "How do you feel?" Williams asks. "Overwhelmed, validated, angry that it took this long, grateful that it happened at all." Luna looks at the emblem again. "I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel." "Feel whatever you feel. There's no correct emotional response to having your career validated after 6 months of fighting for basic recognition." They reach Luna's car. Williams pauses before saying goodbye. "Luna, I want you to understand something. What you did, fighting for retention despite everything stacked against you, that took more courage than most combat actions. You had every reason to give up, every excuse to accept medical separation and walk away. But you didn't. And because you didn't, the system is changing in ways that will help dozens of other operators. I didn't do it to change the system. I did it because I couldn't accept being erased. I know, but impact isn't determined by intention. You've had impact whether you meant to or not." That evening, Luna meets with Dr. Keegan for their regular session. She brings the emblem. "So they made it official," Keegan says, examining the small insignia. "How does that feel?" "Like it validates the cost. For months I've questioned whether making that shot was worth the damage to my brain. Now I have official documentation that yes, it was worth it. The military thinks so, at least." "Do you think so?" Luna considers this. "I think it's more complicated than worth it or not worth it. I made a choice in the moment based on the information I had. I knew I was injured. I assessed myself as mission capable. I made the shot. The injury worsened because of that choice. Regret? No. But grief maybe. Grief for the version of myself that existed before the blast. The version that didn't have tremors or migraines. The version that could process sensory information without distortion." Luna pauses. "I'm adapted now. Functional. But I'm not the same. That's healthy recognition. You're not denying the loss or pretending it doesn't matter. You're acknowledging that something was taken from you while also recognizing what you've gained. What have I gained? Perspective that most operators don't have. Understanding of how to function in degraded states. Empathy for other injured soldiers. And a role that lets you transform your struggle into something that helps others." Keegan leans forward. "Luna, you're not just a sniper anymore. You're becoming something more. A teacher, an advocate, a model for how injury and capability can coexist. I didn't want to be a model. I just wanted to keep shooting. I know. But sometimes the roles that matter most aren't the ones we choose." Over the next several weeks, Luna begins training other instructors for the Degraded State Operations program. They're a diverse group: a combat engineer with a below-knee amputation, a communication specialist with hearing loss from blast exposure, a former ranger with chronic pain from spinal injuries. All of them are operators who've been injured in service but retain expertise the military needs. All of them have fought, or are fighting, retention battles similar to Luna's. "We're not damaged goods," Luna tells them during the first instructor training session. "We're operators who've paid a physical price for our service and are finding ways to remain effective despite that price. That's not weakness. That's adaptation." She teaches them her methods. How to build robust systems that function when optimal conditions aren't available. How to model struggle without hiding it. How to teach students that perfection isn't the goal. Mission accomplishment is. One of the instructors, the combat engineer named Sarah Chen, approaches Luna after a session. "I was medically retired 2 years ago. Told my amputation made me non-deployable, and non-deployable soldiers don't serve in combat engineer roles." Sarah's voice is bitter. "I spent 15 months fighting to get back in. Finally succeeded through an experimental program. But I'm still treated like I'm fragile. Like I might break if anyone expects too much. How do you handle that?" "I perform. Every day. Every task. I demonstrate that I'm capable until people stop questioning it." Sarah pauses. "But it's exhausting. The constant need to prove I'm not deficient." Luna recognizes this pattern. It's her own experience reflected back. That exhaustion is part of the cost. The physical injury, plus the mental and emotional labor of constantly proving competence. It compounds. Luna meets Sarah's eyes. "The only way I've found to manage it is to be honest about the cost. To acknowledge that yes, it's exhausting, and no, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop performing. Does it get easier? No, but you get better at managing it, and hopefully as the system changes, future injured operators won't have to fight as hard as we did. As the program expands, Luna begins to see the impact in concrete terms. Operators who would have been medically retired are instead being assigned to training roles. The military's understanding of what constitutes fitness for duty is slowly shifting from a binary standard to a more nuanced assessment of functional capability. It's not perfect. There are still commanders who resist accommodating injured soldiers, still medical boards that prioritize separation over retention, still cultural assumptions that injury equals incompetence. But it's changing, slowly, incrementally, because Luna fought and because JSOC decided her fight mattered. 6 months after the formal authorization of her emblem, Luna receives an invitation to speak at the Army War College. The topic: Redefining Combat Readiness, Capability in Degraded States. She's terrified. Speaking to senior officers about reconceptualizing fitness standards feels far beyond her expertise or rank. But Major Williams encourages her to accept. You've lived this. You've demonstrated this. Your perspective matters precisely because you're not a general theorizing about policy. You're a staff sergeant who fought for survival in a system that wanted to discard you. Luna accepts the invitation. Standing at the podium in front of dozens of colonels and generals, Luna pins her emblem to her uniform. The 3,200mm reticle catches the light, small enough that most people in the audience probably don't notice it. But she notices. And that's what matters. My name is Staff Sergeant Luna Valdez, she begins. I'm a sniper with a traumatic brain injury. According to conventional readiness standards, those two statements are contradictory. You're either a qualified sniper or you have a brain injury that prevents qualification. But I'm here to tell you that contradiction is false. She proceeds to tell her story. Not all of it. The specific mission details remain classified. But enough. The injury, the 6 months of fighting for retention, the hostile command climate, General Matthews's evaluation, the new training program. The question isn't whether injured operators can perform, Luna concludes. The question is whether we're willing to accommodate their injuries so they can perform. Every operator will eventually be injured. Every operator will eventually face degraded physical or cognitive conditions. If we treat injury as automatic disqualification, we lose decades of expertise and operational knowledge. She pauses, looking at the senior officers watching her. I made one of the most difficult shots in modern military history while my brain was already damaged. I did it because the training I'd received was robust enough to function even when I wasn't optimal. That's what we need to build into every operator. Systems that work when the operator is tired, injured, stressed, or compromised. Because combat guarantees you'll be all of those things eventually. The response is mixed. Some officers clearly agree, nodding and taking notes. Others look skeptical, uncomfortable with the idea that injury and capability can coexist. But after the presentation, a 2-star general approaches Luna. General Patricia Morrison, no relation to David Morrison, is known as a reformer, someone willing to challenge conventional military thinking. Staff Sergeant, that was the most important presentation I've heard in 5 years at the War College. Morrison's voice is firm. You've articulated something we've been struggling to understand. That readiness isn't about perfect soldiers. It's about soldiers who can accomplish the mission despite imperfection. Thank you, ma'am. I want to bring you to the Pentagon. Brief the Joint Chiefs on this training program. They need to hear this directly from someone who's lived it, not filtered through officers theorizing about policy. Luna feels overwhelmed again. Brief the Joint Chiefs, the highest military leadership in the country, about her injury and her fight and her belief that the system needs to change. Ma'am, I'm not sure I'm the right person. You're exactly the right person. You're credible because you're living the reality, not conceptualizing it. Morrison hands Luna a card. Think about it, but understand that what you're doing matters at the highest levels of military policy. That night, Luna calls Dr. Keegan. They want me to brief the Joint Chiefs. Of course they do. You're the proof of concept for everything they're trying to implement. I'm terrified. What if I say the wrong thing? What if my symptoms flare during the briefing? What if I'm not articulate enough to explain what needs to change? Luna, you've already explained it successfully to generals at the War College. You've trained instructors who are teaching these methods to dozens of students. You've lived through 6 months of hell and emerged not just surviving, but thriving. Keegan's voice is gentle. You're ready for this. And if your symptoms flare during the briefing, you'll manage them the way you always do. Professionally, openly, demonstrating that impairment doesn't equal incapacity. What if I fail? Define failure. If you mean, what if you don't perform perfectly? You won't. You'll perform honestly, which is more valuable. If you mean, what if the Joint Chiefs don't implement the changes you're advocating? That's on them, not on you. Your job is to present the case. Their job is to decide what to do with it. Luna sits with this. She's spent 6 months fighting for personal survival. Now she's being asked to fight for systemic change. The scale is overwhelming, but she thinks about Sarah Chen, the combat engineer who spent 15 months fighting to return to service. She thinks about Rodriguez, the student who learned from watching her struggle. She thinks about all the operators who will face similar battles in the future, battles that might be easier if the system changes now. I'll do it, she tells Keegan. I'll brief the Joint Chiefs. 3 weeks later, Luna stands in the Pentagon, outside a conference room where the Joint Chiefs are gathering. She's in her dress uniform, the emblem pinned to her shoulder. Her hands are shaking, not badly, but enough that she notices. She closes her eyes, counts backward from 10, forces her breathing into the rhythm that bypasses conscious thought. When she opens her eyes, Major Williams is standing beside her. You've got this. My hands are shaking. So what? Your hands shake. Your brain is injured. You're still the most qualified person in this building to talk about degraded state operations. Williams squeezes Luna's shoulder. Go in there and tell them the truth. That's all they need. Luna enters the conference room. The Joint Chiefs sit around a large table. 4-star generals and admirals representing every branch of the military. General Hargrove from JSOC is also present, along with several other senior officers. Staff Sergeant Valdez, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, begins. We've read the reports about the training program you've developed. We've heard from General Morrison about your presentation at the War College. We'd like to hear directly from you about what you've learned and what you believe needs to change. Luna steps to the front of the room. Her prepared remarks are on a tablet, but she finds she doesn't need them. The words come from 6 months of fighting, from teaching students who needed to understand that injury doesn't equal incompetence, from her own experience of making an impossible shot with a damaged brain. Sirs, ma'ams, I sustained a traumatic brain injury during a combat mission. According to conventional standards, that injury should have ended my career. But it didn't, because I was able to demonstrate that I could still perform my duties despite impairment. She proceeds to tell her story, more fully than she told it at the War College. The hostile command environment, the systematic questioning of her service record, the conditional retention that almost became medical separation, and finally, the training program that's emerged from her struggle. Luna stood before the Joint Chiefs, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the edge of the podium, but her voice remained steady. What I've learned is that our current system treats injury as a binary condition. You're either fit or you're not. But combat doesn't work that way. Every operator I've trained has performed missions while exhausted, dehydrated, injured, or compromised in some way. The question isn't whether we can eliminate impairment. We can't. The question is whether we can train operators to function effectively despite impairment. The chairman leaned forward. Staff Sergeant, help us understand something. You made a shot at 300 meters while suffering from a traumatic brain injury. How is that possible? Luna had prepared for this question, though it still made her uncomfortable to discuss the mission in even general terms. Sir, the shot was possible because my training was deeper than conscious thought. The mathematics of ballistics, the muscle memory of position and breathing, the mental discipline required for extreme precision. These had been practiced so many times that they became reflexive. When my brain was damaged, those reflexes remained partially intact. Partially intact, repeated the Chief of Naval Operations. But not fully functional. No, ma'am. I had to work harder to access the calculations. My processing speed was slower. My sensory integration was compromised. But the core skills were still there, buried beneath the injury. I just had to find new pathways to access them. Admiral Chen from the Navy spoke up. This sounds like you're advocating for keeping injured personnel in operational roles despite medical evidence that they're compromised. That seems dangerous. Luna had anticipated resistance. She chose her words carefully. Sir, I'm not advocating for keeping severely impaired personnel in roles where they can't perform. I'm advocating for evaluating actual performance rather than making assumptions based on medical diagnoses. In my case, despite documented TBI symptoms, My qualification scores remained within acceptable ranges. In some cases, my scores under stress exceeded those of uninjured operators because I'd developed such robust compensation mechanisms. She pulled up a slide showing comparative data from her students, their performance before and after training in degraded state operations. These are operators who've completed the resilience training program. The green line shows their baseline performance. The red line shows their performance under simulated stress conditions before training. The blue line shows their performance under the same stress conditions after learning degraded state techniques. The data was striking. The blue line consistently exceeded the red line, sometimes by significant margins. What this demonstrates is that training operators to function in impaired states doesn't just help injured personnel, it improves performance across the board, because every operator will eventually face conditions where they're not optimal. Teaching them to maintain mission effectiveness despite degradation is a force multiplier. General Hargrove interjected. Staff Sergeant Valdez's program has been running for 6 months now. We've trained 43 students through the pilot phase. Their deployment performance has been tracked, and the results support her conclusions. These operators are maintaining higher effectiveness rates in adverse conditions compared to control groups. The room fell silent as the chiefs absorbed this information. Luna could see calculations happening behind their eyes. Assessments of risk versus benefit, tradition versus innovation, the political implications of changing long-established medical retention policies. The chairman spoke again. Staff Sergeant, I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Do you believe the Army did right by you over the past 6 months? Luna felt the weight of the question. This was her opportunity to criticize the system that had nearly broken her, to call out the failures that had made her fight so hard for basic recognition. No, sir. I don't believe the system handled my case appropriately. I had to fight for 6 months to prove that my service record was real, that my capabilities remained intact, that my injury didn't define my worth as a soldier. That fight was unnecessary and harmful. It compounded my injury by adding psychological stress to the physical symptoms I was already managing. She paused, making sure every person in the room was listening. But I also recognized that the system didn't know how to handle a case like mine. We don't have established frameworks for operators who are injured but still highly capable. We don't have cultural acceptance of the idea that impairment and excellence can coexist. The people who questioned my retention weren't necessarily malicious. They were operating within a paradigm that treats injury as disqualifying by default. So what needs to change? Asked the Army Chief of Staff. Luna had thought about this question for months, discussing it with Dr. Keegan, with Major Williams, with the instructors she'd trained. 3 things, sir. First, medical retention decisions for operators with classified records need to be made by personnel with appropriate clearances who can evaluate the full context of their service. Staff Sergeant Chen questioned my record because he couldn't see the classified portions. That created a hostile environment based on ignorance rather than informed assessment. The chiefs nodded. This was already being implemented through Hargrove's policy changes. Second, we need to shift from binary fitness assessments to functional capability assessments. Instead of asking, does this soldier have a TBI? We should ask, can this soldier perform their assigned duties despite their TBI? Those are fundamentally different questions with different answers. And third, prompted the chairman, third, we need to invest in training all operators, not just injured ones, in degraded state performance. Because the skills I've developed to function with a TBI are the same skills that help uninjured operators function when they're exhausted, stressed, operating in extreme environments, or facing any condition that compromises optimal performance. Luna advanced to her final slide, which showed a proposed framework for the program expansion. What I'm recommending is a service-wide initiative to train operators in resilience and degraded state operations, not as a specialized program for injured personnel, but as a core competency for everyone. Because combat doesn't wait for you to be at your best. Combat happens when you're tired, scared, injured, and barely holding it together. And if we can train people to maintain effectiveness under those conditions, we build a more resilient force. The briefing continued for another hour, with detailed questions about implementation, costs, training timelines, and integration with existing programs. Luna answered as best she could, drawing on her 6 months of experience running the pilot program. Finally, the chairman stood. Staff Sergeant Valdez, thank you for your candor and your service. We'll take your recommendations under advisement as we develop force-wide policy on medical retention and resilience training. He paused. I want you to know that what happened to you, the 6 months of fighting for recognition, represents a failure we're committed to addressing. Not just for you, but for every operator who comes after you. Luna saluted. Thank you, sir. That's all I wanted, to make it easier for the next person. As she left the conference room, General Hargrove caught up with her in the hallway. That was exceptional. You presented complex material to the highest level of military leadership and did it with a combination of honesty and professionalism that's rare. He handed her a folder. This is your new assignment. You're being promoted to Sergeant First Class, effective immediately, and you're being assigned to JSOC headquarters as the primary architect of the Degraded State Operations Training Program. Luna opened the folder, scanning the orders. Promotion to E7. Assignment to Fort Bragg under JSOC. Expanded responsibilities including curriculum development, instructor training, and program assessment across all service branches. Sir, this is more than I expected. It's what you've earned, and it's what the program needs. You can't run this initiative as a staff sergeant. You need the rank authority to make things happen. Hargrove's expression was serious. But I need you to understand what you're taking on. This isn't just about teaching anymore. You're going to be building policy, negotiating with skeptical commanders, defending your methods against people who think injured operators should be automatically separated. It's going to be hard. Harder than the past 6 months? Different kind of hard. You won't be fighting for your own survival anymore. You'll be fighting for systemic change, which means you'll face institutional resistance at every level. Luna thought about this. She'd spent 6 months in survival mode, focused entirely on proving her own worth. Now she was being asked to expand that fight to include every injured operator in the military. I'll do it, she said, but I'm going to need support. Medical specialists who understand TBI, experienced instructors who can help develop curriculum, and political cover when I inevitably upset commanders who don't like their assumptions being challenged. You'll have all of that. Major Williams is being reassigned as your deputy. Dr. Keegan has agreed to serve as the program's medical advisor, and you'll have direct access to me and my staff when you need institutional support. Hargrove extended his hand. Welcome to the fight that matters, Sergeant First Class Valdez. Luna shook his hand, feeling the weight of the new responsibility settling onto her shoulders. That evening, Luna called Dr. Keegan from her hotel room near the Pentagon. I got promoted and assigned to build the program service-wide. Congratulations. How do you feel? Terrified, overwhelmed, like I'm about to fail in very public and consequential ways. That's a normal response to significant responsibility. Keegan's voice was calm, grounding. Let's talk about what you're actually afraid of. Luna sat on the hotel bed, staring at her new orders. I'm afraid that I'll design a program that works for me but doesn't work for other people. That my specific experience with TBI won't translate to other injuries or other circumstances. That I'll build something that looks good on paper but fails when implemented across the force. Those are reasonable concerns. What else? I'm afraid that my symptoms will get worse. That the stress of this assignment will trigger more frequent migraines, worse tremors, faster progression of the injury, and that when that happens, people will point to me as proof that injured operators shouldn't be retained. Also reasonable. What are you going to do about these fears? Luna appreciated that Keegan didn't try to minimize her concerns or offer false reassurance. They were real risks that needed real management strategies. For the program design, I'm going to build a diverse team. Operators with different injuries, different specialties, different experiences. Make sure the curriculum reflects multiple perspectives rather than just my own. Good. And for your symptoms? I'm going to be rigorous about medical monitoring. Monthly evaluations like Matthew's mandated, but also weekly check-ins with you to track psychological stress. And I'm going to be honest when I'm struggling. Model the behavior I'm trying to teach, rather than hiding my symptoms out of fear of being seen as weak. That's exactly right. You can't teach others to acknowledge their limitations if you're not acknowledging your own. They talked for another 30 minutes about practical strategies for managing the transition, how to delegate effectively, how to recognize when she was pushing too hard, how to maintain the boundaries between professional demands and personal well-being. After the call ended, Luna sat in silence, looking at her new rank insignia. Sergeant First Class, E7, a rank that typically took soldiers 15 years to reach. She'd made it in 9, accelerated by a combination of combat deployments, specialized skills, and now this assignment that recognized her unique perspective on injury and capability. Her phone buzzed with a text from Major Williams. Heard about the promotion. Congratulations, Sergeant First Class. Looking forward to working with you in the new assignment. We're going to do good work. Then another text from Rodriguez, her former student. SSG just told us you got promoted and assigned to JSOC. That's amazing. Thank you for everything you taught us. And finally, one from Sarah Chen, the combat engineer instructor. Congratulations on the promotion. You're going to change how the military thinks about injury. That matters more than you know. Luna read the messages, feeling a complex mixture of pride, anxiety, and responsibility. She'd spent 6 months fighting to save her own career. Now she had the opportunity to change the system that had made that fight necessary, but the weight of that opportunity was substantial. If she succeeded, dozens, maybe hundreds, of injured operators would have an easier path to continued service. If she failed, she'd reinforce the very assumption she was trying to dismantle, that injured operators are liabilities rather than assets. 18 months later, Sergeant First Class Luna Valdez stood in the Fort Bragg training facility, watching a class of 30 operators work through degraded state scenarios. The facility had been purpose-built for the program, modular spaces that could be reconfigured for different environmental challenges, advanced simulation systems that could replicate combat stressors, medical monitoring stations that tracked performance metrics in real time. The program had grown beyond anything Luna had initially imagined. What started as a pilot course for 12 students had expanded to a service-wide initiative training over 300 operators per quarter. Every Special Operations Command, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, now sent personnel through the degraded state operations course. But the expansion hadn't been smooth. Luna's thoughts drifted back to the battles she'd fought over the past year and a half. Commanders who resisted sending their operators to training that acknowledged impairment. Medical boards that questioned whether teaching degraded state performance encouraged unsafe behavior. Budget committees that viewed the program as unnecessary expense. Each battle had required careful navigation, presenting data on improved performance outcomes, building coalitions with supportive senior officers, demonstrating that the program enhanced rather than compromised readiness. Major Williams approached, now Lieutenant Colonel Williams after her own promotion. The Secretary of Defense's office just called. They want you to brief the National Security Council next month. The topic is military readiness in extended conflicts where personnel degradation is inevitable. Luna absorbed this. The National Security Council, the highest level of defense policy making. Her journey from fighting for personal retention to advising national leadership felt surreal. What's the context? They're planning for potential conflicts that would require sustained operations over years rather than months. They want to understand how the military maintains effectiveness when personnel are inevitably worn down by extended deployments. Williams pulled up a document on her tablet. Your program is being cited as a model for how to train forces that remain effective even as they accumulate stress, fatigue, and injury. That's a significant expansion of scope. We designed this program for operators with existing injuries, not as a force-wide readiness initiative. The principles are the same. Whether you're managing a TBI or managing the accumulated stress of 3 back-to-back deployments, the core skills are identical. Recognizing your degraded state, implementing compensation strategies, maintaining mission focus despite impairment. Luna knew Williams was right. The techniques she'd developed for her own TBI, systematic approaches to symptom management, mental frameworks for maintaining performance during neurological distress, honest acknowledgement of limitations combined with strategic workarounds, these applied broadly to any condition that compromised optimal function. I'll prepare the briefing, but I want to make sure we're not overselling what the program can do. It improves resilience, but it doesn't eliminate the consequences of pushing people too hard for too long. That's exactly the message they need to hear. Not that we can build an invincible force, but that we can build a force that degrades more slowly and recovers more effectively. After Williams left, Luna walked through the training facility, observing different classes in progress. In one bay, operators practiced precision tasks while managing induced fatigue, 36 hours without sleep, then complex problem-solving and marksmanship under time pressure. In another, combat medics trained to perform procedures while experiencing simulated pain, learning to maintain fine motor control despite significant discomfort. The program had evolved significantly from Luna's initial vision. She'd brought in experts from multiple disciplines: sports psychology, cognitive neuroscience, occupational therapy, even performing arts, studying how professional musicians maintain technique while managing stage fright, or how dancers performed through injury. All of it synthesized into a comprehensive approach to human performance in suboptimal conditions. Luna stopped at a viewing window overlooking the main training floor. On the floor below, an operator she didn't recognize was working through a long-range shooting scenario. The operator's left arm was in a stabilization brace, some kind of shoulder or elbow injury, Luna guessed, but the shot placement was excellent, the operator having adapted their position and technique to compensate for the reduced mobility. Sarah Chen appeared beside Luna at the window. That's Corporal Marcus Webb, rotator cuff surgery 3 months ago. Still has restricted range of motion, probably will for another 6 months, but he wanted to maintain his sniper qualification, so we've been working with him on modified shooting positions that don't require full shoulder rotation. Is he mission capable? In certain contexts, yes. He can't do rapid target transitions that require quick position changes, but for static overwatch scenarios where he can set up properly, his accuracy is as good as it was before the injury. Sarah paused. 2 years ago, he would have been medically separated, or at least removed from sniper duties. Now we're keeping him operational while he completes rehabilitation. This was the kind of outcome Luna had envisioned when she first proposed the program. Operators remaining in their specialties despite injuries that would have traditionally ended their careers. How's his psychological state? Is he frustrated by the limitations? He was initially. Went through the same emotional process you did. Grief for his pre-injury capabilities, anger at the system, fear that he'd be pushed out. But the program gave him a framework for understanding that limitation doesn't equal uselessness. He's adapted. Luna watched Webb complete another shot sequence. His modified position unorthodox but effective. That's what I wanted. Not to pretend that injury doesn't matter, but to show that injury can be integrated into operational capability, rather than treated as automatic disqualification. Her phone buzzed. A message from Dr. Keegan. Monthly check-in tomorrow at 1400. How are the symptoms? Luna typed her response. Manageable. Had 2 migraines this week, both environmentally triggered. Tremors are baseline. Cognitive function is stable. The stress of the NSC briefing prep is noticeable, but not overwhelming. Keegan's reply came immediately. Good. We'll discuss stress management strategies tomorrow. You're carrying a lot of responsibility. Make sure you're not sacrificing your own health for the program. Luna appreciated the reminder. It was easy to get lost in the work, to push through symptoms because the mission felt too important to pause for self-care. But that was exactly the pattern she was trying to teach operators to avoid. The destructive cycle of ignoring limitations until they became crises. That evening, Luna returned to her quarters and pulled out the emblem. The 3,200-meter insignia that had caused so much conflict 2 years ago now sat in a shadow box on her desk, alongside her promotion certificate and the Army Commendation Medal with Valor device. She thought about the shot that had earned the emblem, the mountain range in Afghanistan, the wind that varied with altitude, the target moving between cover points, and her own brain, already damaged but still functional enough to run the calculations, to make the corrections, to execute the impossible. That shot had cost her so much. The worsening of her injury, the 6 months of fighting for retention, the permanent changes to her neurological function that would affect her for the rest of her life. But it had also given her something, the knowledge that excellence and impairment weren't mutually exclusive, that capability could survive injury, that the human capacity for adaptation was more powerful than most people realized. Luna's journey from that mountainside to this moment, standing in a purpose-built facility training hundreds of operators in the methods she'd developed, felt both logical and impossible. Logical because the skills she'd learned managing her own injury naturally extended to teaching others. Impossible because the institutional barriers she'd overcome should have defeated her. A knock on her door interrupted her reflection. Lieutenant Colonel Williams stood in the hallway. Sorry to bother you after hours, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something that's coming down the pipeline. Luna invited her in. Williams sat heavily in the desk chair, looking tired. The program's success has attracted attention. Good attention, mostly. We're being cited as a model for innovation in military training. Our outcomes data is exceptional. Operator feedback is overwhelmingly positive. But, Luna heard the unspoken concern in Williams' voice. But some senior leaders are pushing to make degraded state training mandatory for all special operations personnel. Not just the voluntary course we're running now, but a required qualification that operators must pass before deployment. Luna considered the implications. That would change the program fundamentally. Right now, we're teaching people who want to learn how to manage impairment. If it becomes mandatory, we'll be forcing the training on people who might resist the entire concept. Exactly. And there's political motivation behind the push. Some leaders want to be able to say they've solved the problem of operator degradation during extended conflicts. But you can't solve human limitations through mandatory training any more than you can eliminate injury through better equipment. What do you think we should do? Williams was quiet for a moment. I think we recommend against mandatory implementation. Make the case that the program works because it's voluntary, because people come to it already recognizing their own limitations and wanting tools to manage them. Force it on everyone, and you'll get resentment and superficial compliance rather than genuine skill development. That's going to be an unpopular recommendation. Probably, but it's the right one. This program succeeds because it respects the operator's agency. It gives them tools to manage their own performance rather than imposing a one-size-fits-all solution. Take away that agency, and you undermine the core philosophy. Luna nodded. This was the kind of institutional battle she'd been warned about, defending the program's integrity against well-intentioned but potentially harmful modifications. I'll include that analysis in the NSC briefing. Frame it as preserving program effectiveness rather than resisting expansion. Good. Williams stood to leave, then paused. Luna, I want you to know something. 2 years ago, when you were fighting just to stay in service, I wasn't sure you'd make it. The system was stacked against you. Chen was relentless, and your medical profile made you vulnerable. But you persisted. And because you persisted, we've built something that's changing how the military thinks about injury and capability. I didn't do it alone. No, you didn't. But you were the catalyst. Your willingness to fight when it would have been easier to accept medical separation. That's what made this possible. After Williams left, Luna returned to looking at her emblem. The small insignia that had once been unauthorized, questioned, used as evidence of her supposed instability, now sat as a validated symbol of achievement that had transformed into a career-defining institutional change. She thought about all the operators who would go through the program in the coming years. The soldiers with TBIs, the Marines with chronic pain, the airmen with hearing loss, the sailors with mobility limitations, all of them learning that injury doesn't have to mean the end of their operational capabilities. She thought about the commanders who would have to adjust their thinking, accepting that their most effective operators might also be their most visibly impaired. She thought about the medical professionals who would need new frameworks for assessing fitness, moving beyond binary determinations to nuanced evaluations of functional capability in specific contexts. All of this change, emerging from one damaged soldier's refusal to accept that her injury defined her worth. 5 years after that meeting in General Matthews's conference room, Sergeant First Class Luna Valdez stood at Arlington National Cemetery. She wasn't attending a funeral. She was here for a memorial service honoring fallen Special Operations personnel from the past year. Among those being remembered was the operator whose life had been saved by Luna's 3,200-meter shot. Master Sergeant David Torres had survived that mission in Afghanistan, returned to service, completed 2 more deployments, and retired honorably. He'd died 6 months ago of cancer, but he'd lived long enough to see his children graduate high school, long enough to build a life beyond the uniform. At the service, Torres' widow approached Luna. "You're the sniper, the one who made the shot that saved David's team." Luna had never met Torres' family. The mission had been classified, her role in it unknown outside specific channels. But the recent declassification had allowed Torres' widow to learn more about what had happened that day in the mountains. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't be sorry. You gave us 15 more years. David was supposed to die in that valley. The intelligence said the attack was imminent, that his team wouldn't have survived, but you stopped it." Torres' widow handed Luna a photo. "This is our daughter's wedding last year. David walked her down the aisle. That moment exists because of what you did." Luna looked at the photo, a beaming bride with her father, both of them radiating joy. This was the calculus she'd never been able to complete, whether the shot that saved lives was worth the permanent damage to her brain. The answer, she realized, wasn't about mathematics. It was about this: a father walking his daughter down the aisle, a family getting 15 years they wouldn't have had, a life extended by one impossible shot made by a soldier with a damaged brain who refused to let injury define capability. "Thank you for telling me," Luna said quietly. "I've spent 5 years wondering whether the cost was justified. This helps." After the service, Luna walked among the headstones. She thought about all the operators buried here, all the soldiers who'd given everything for the mission. She thought about how close she'd come to having her own career ended not by death, but by institutional indifference to injured soldiers. Her phone buzzed. A message from the program's administrative staff. Latest quarterly report is ready for your review. 847 operators trained this quarter. 94% completion rate. Average performance improvement of 23% in degraded state scenarios. 2 more service branches requesting program expansion. 847 operators in 1 quarter. Nearly 12,000 trained since the program's inception. Each one learning techniques that might save their life or extend their career. Each one walking away with tools to manage impairment rather than surrender to it. Luna had come to Arlington today to honor fallen operators. But standing among the graves, she realized she was also honoring her own near miss with institutional burial. The career death that almost came not from enemy action, but from a system that couldn't process injured excellence. She'd survived. And because she'd survived, thousands of others would have an easier path. That evening, Luna sat in her office at Fort Bragg, reviewing the NSC briefing one final time. The core message had crystallized through years of teaching, fighting institutional battles, watching operators transform their relationship with injury. Excellence doesn't require perfection. Mission accomplishment doesn't demand optimal conditions. And human capability, properly understood and deliberately cultivated, extends far beyond the narrow definitions we've traditionally accepted. The military needs operators who can function when they're tired, hurt, scared, and barely holding together, because that's when combat actually happens. Teaching people to maintain effectiveness in degraded states isn't accommodation. It's readiness. It's the difference between a force that breaks under sustained pressure and a force that bends, adapts, and continues to fight. I'm living proof of this principle. I made one of the most difficult shots in modern military history while my brain was actively damaged. I've spent 5 years building a program that's trained 12,000 operators while managing tremors, migraines, and cognitive impairments that would have disqualified me under traditional standards. Not because I'm special, but because I learned to integrate injury into capability rather than allowing injury to define limitation. That's the transformation we need. From a military that discards injured operators to a military that adapts alongside them. From fitness standards based on optimal conditions to standards based on mission requirements in realistic conditions. From a culture that equates injury with weakness to a culture that recognizes adaptation as strength. Luna saved the document and pinned her emblem to her dress uniform for tomorrow's briefing. The 3,200mm insignia that had once been forbidden, questioned, and used against her now sat on her shoulder as official recognition of an achievement that had changed her life and, unexpectedly, changed the institution that had almost discarded her. She thought about Staff Sergeant Chen, about General Matthews, about all the people who'd questioned whether a female soldier with a TBI could possibly be the operator her classified record suggested. She thought about Dr. E. Keegan and Major Williams and all the people who'd supported her through the worst of the fighting. Most of all, she thought about the shot. The impossible distance, the variable wind, the damaged brain that had somehow maintained enough function to complete the mathematics, to make the corrections, to execute what should have been impossible. That shot had broken her. That shot had proven her. That shot had eventually transformed her into something more than just a sniper, into an advocate for every injured operator who refused to let institutional assumptions define their worth. Luna turned off her office light and headed home, ready for tomorrow's briefing, ready for the next battle in the ongoing fight to change how the military understood capability and limitation. The emblem on her shoulder caught the hallway light one final time, a small insignia, barely noticeable, representing a distance that shouldn't have been possible, and a journey that had transformed one soldier's fight for survival into institutional change that would echo through generations of operators to come.